Turn it over to our chair, Brian Laval.
Right, I will call this meeting of the State Advisory Panel for Exceptional Children to order. I would also like to note that we do not have a quorum, so we cannot take action on any items on our agenda. The first thing that I want to do is welcome you all to the meeting and to also let you know that I have accepted a position with the department. So as a result, I'll be submitting that letter of resignation to the State Advisory Panel for Exceptional Children. So I'm ineligible to serve. I do want to let you know that it has been one of the greatest opportunities of my life to work on this panel and to work with each and every one of you. I look around faces that I have known for over a decade, and I see new faces that I've just met in the last year or two. And I've made many friends and many connections across the state that I will always cherish. So, again, since I'm no longer a member, and I will submit the letter of recommendation for the record. And once there's a quorum, Dr. East solicited a request for a vote. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. East, who will serve as the acting chair in my absence. Is there any discussion?
Thank you, Brian, for your service.
It has been
Second time around.
it's been my distinct pleasure.
Is this working? Yes, if I speak in, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good deal. So I verbally accept the resignation. I almost didn't want to.
Yeah.
I didn't want to give it.
But wow, it's been a great journey. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your guidance and helping me transition to the Commonwealth. And I hope I do you proud.
Yeah.
Well,
See you around the block or two.
I'll be.
Well, good morning. I'll be serving in this capacity as chair for the time until we establish a quorum. So I am going to now turn it over to Joe for the review of meeting norms and duties and responsibilities.
You want to go ahead and you want to actually do roll call first, and then I'll review them. That's okay.
We'll do.
Thanks.
If you are on virtually, when I call, just say virtually so I can mark as noted. M. Shaw,
Virtual.
Barlow, Bell, Bolander, Ward present. Sorry. Get that corrected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jenny Ward.
Bradley,
Here.
Brewer, Carruthers, Clark, Coles, Crump, Curry,
Here.
East, present. Dumbo.
Here.
Fox. Giles. Eastwood. Jones. Kelch. Kaplan. Kleiner. Levin. McNabb.
Here virtually.
Miller.
Present virtual.
Morgan. Noel. Haynes. Reed. Robinson. Clayton.
Virtual.
Middleton. Ex officio. Present. I do have one question.
All right.
So does Brian only not serve in this capacity as chair? Or does he continue to not on off chair? I mean, off panel? Yes, okay.
The long run. And,
Brothers,
and I had one question. April Miller, you called in correctly. I just wanted to make sure and identify the 606 number. I think that's you, April, right?
Yes, it is.
All right. Thank you.
at this time, we do not have an established quorum. If someone does come on line, we'll do try to do a review. And once a quorum is established, so we can take a motion to accept Brian's resignation, the vote. But at this time, we presently do not have an established quorum, which means we will only be in commentary and we cannot take a vote on any action items that will require a vote today.
And if my count's correct, we have 9, we need 2, right? Because Greta is ex officio, Brian is no longer on the panel, so I think we have 9.
I have 10.
Oh, do you?
I have 9 on mine.
Lashina just came in.
Oh,
Lashina
Sheena.
just came in. Danny,
Thank you.
well, she came in and put her stuff down.
Oh, she's in, I think, so she's on site, so we have 10, we just
Yes,
need 1
We
member.
need one member.
Thanks for catching.
Now we'll move on with the agenda as printed with a review of meeting
The
norms.
meeting norms. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Just keep in mind, interpreters are provided on site here for each SAPEC meeting. Members must speak when called on for roll call, which I appreciate everyone doing, or for any voting if we do get a quorum. Reminder, stay focused on the topic agenda at hand for the sake of time, be that in regular business or committee meetings. One additional thing I want to remind you of is since we are doing a hybrid meeting, there is a raised hand feature and a chat in Teams. Just keep in mind that it's very difficult when people are presenting to get questions during the presentation. So if you do raise your hand, at some point we will stop and pause to address questions for presentations, but just be patient with us on that because presentations can continue to roll and then questions, we balance that out. So I just want you to be aware of that. Additional feedback from members is provided through the meeting exit slip. Our secretary, Mr. Slayton, is taking notes for the meeting and we solely appreciate him. Thank you, Danny, for that. The meeting materials are located in our Google folder. They're also sent in advance through email. And so we help make sure all members get that information in advance. It's also in the meeting calendar invite. Travel vouchers are emailed to Angie Gould in process by OSEAL. If you did have lodging last night, make sure to turn that in for reimbursement to Angie, and we'll get that processed. And meals are provided if lodging is overnight, and so be sure to include that on your travel voucher as well. And so again, thank you for being here, and I will turn it back over to Dr. East.
Okay, panel. Yesterday, and our apologies, you can see how detailed the minutes are. So I can't say enough about Danny and the work that he did for me. I had to take minutes one time and appreciated it even more. So thank you, Danny. If you have, please review. We can probably establish right now, probably about 5 minutes to review the minutes. If you did not receive those yesterday virtually, check your emails now. And we will pause for 5 minutes to review. If you have any submissions, we'll come back to revisions from the April 27th and 28th meeting at this time. Panel, at this time, we're going to go just a little bit of deviation. At this time, we're going to open the floor up for discussion on any corrections or notations to April's minute. And then once our quorum is established again, we'll then take a vote on April's minute. So at this time, is there any discussion or correction? We'll recognize our virtual members at this time.
I have nothing.
April Miller, I have no comments.
At this time, on site, any noted corrections to the minutes?
If I may, bear with me here because I'm a bit of an editor, so my people in the back are probably giggling.
Yeah, she's the editing queen.
And I'm not going deep, but on page 3, under summary of discussion, Hilton is misspelled, and I have circled these so I can give this to somebody. The technical assistance networks, that's actually special education regional technical assistance centers. There's a couple of typos in that first paragraph, nothing major, but just a couple words that are misspelled because of typos. On page 4, there's a content clarification. In the, excuse me, in the paragraph in the center of the page under summary of discussion, it says we were awarded the 1.5 million. Just for a clarification point, that was the Governor's Office of Early Childhood, not Katie. So we can just quickly add that in just so that it's correct. And then down under presenters, it says Jane Hunter. That was actually Painter, and that's I've added this in here. So if it's okay with the panel, I can give that to folks. And then throughout there were just a couple of other small typos that no content changes, but a couple other typos that I have circled. So I can go through those, or I can just pass those along for you to incorporate into the minutes. There were no content. Okay.
Thanks, Greta. One other thing I would add is that typically we send the meeting summary through our KDE communications for review. But based on timing, that was a little bit difficult. And so it currently is with KDE communications for review. So we can make those changes, and we'll be sure to get the copy that Greta has given us to add those changes in. And then we will make sure to make the changes and get that to you at the October meeting. Is that okay?
Yes, that works for us. At this time, we do have
I had
Okay.
one other correction, just
Okay.
content on page 7, where I talked about different interpretations. It's the very bottom of the page. Basically, I think this was in reference to, there's something missing here around the live streaming piece, making it, that's one of the issues that makes it more challenging, I think, for KDE to run this meeting.
But what should that be, Tal?
It's just adding a sentence there, and I'll write it down.
Danny Taylor's gonna write that, and I'll get those in person corrections and then upload those to you so you can make those changes. Will that work for you?
Yes, thank you.
And again, Danny, thank you so much for taking notes for us. I know it's a difficult job and that was a lot of notes, so we appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I make one more request, Chair? On page 5, on the last paragraph, the sentence that says Katie doesn't necessarily have a dog in the race. I would move to omit that just because of it being just language not to go in minutes, basically. I don't think it brings any value add. And then also at the top of page 5, the second paragraph, it says Deputy Commissioner Hilton. That should be Associate Commissioner.
And where was the omission on page 5?
It is in the very last paragraph that begins with Hilton shared KDE's perspective.
Okay.
Good catch. Thank you.
At this time, we do have a quorum established. So I'm gonna go back in reverse order as we review this to do it correctly. Can I have a motion to accept the noted corrections with changes to the minutes? And then will be resent back out to the panel once those corrections have been corrected and reviewed by KDE Comms team.
That motion.
Motion by Bradley. Can I get a second?
I'll
Second.
second it. This is Cora.
Or second by Cora. Is there any discussion? He had that first. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any abstention? Motion passes that the panel will submit the noted corrections and revisions to April 23rd meeting and with the review by KDE and resend that back out to the panel. Thank you. Next order of business, we'll have Ms. Melody Cooper provide us a membership update at this time.
Good morning, everybody. Excited to see everyone here on site and virtually. So the update is there is no update currently. I have reached out to our liaison at the governor's office, and we just don't have an update yet on membership. But I do think, having Brian's resignation, we'll be able to go ahead and maybe nudge him again. That'll give me a good reason to touch base again. So I'll, if there are any updates after I speak with him, I will let the group know through the Google Drive. That's it.
Melody, when was your last communication? Do you recall?
I reached back out to him a couple of weeks ago
Okay.
in preparation for this meeting, and so, my apologies, I've got it pulled up here. We do have, several vacancies that need to be filled. I'm thinking, quick count here. Fourteen. Yeah, it looks like we have 14 who are either currently vacant or going to expire soon.
And we have provided a spreadsheet to
Yes.
Brian Perry in Legal Services, who is our contact who coordinates with the governor's office. So we just rely on his communication.
I will say that, whenever, it would be helpful whenever anyone is going to resign, that you go ahead and let us know, or, if that happens, that any resignation would be done through an email as well, so that we can make sure that we forward that on to the correct people at the governor's office, because there were a couple of those vacancies that they weren't sure of, so just to make sure when we have those types of things come up, that, let us know through the official channel so that we can make sure that's documented as quickly as possible.
Just not letting you know, like,
Well, since I've only been in this position for a few months, I'm not sure about what that process was beforehand. But, as of now, the only resignation we had was Brian, and so that's on track. But
I'm not telling you.
oh, yeah.
You were asking for a friend.
This is Tracy. I'm trying to keep up, and I apologize. I was not at the last meeting due to a family emergency. So who has resigned?
Chair Brian Lovell.
Oh, okay. I did not get the minutes from last meeting, I don't think. Okay, and I was just looking at the agenda, and it had Brian Lovell on the agenda, so he has resigned.
Yes, he has accepted a position with the cabinet
Okay.
and
Okay,
can no longer serve in this capacity.
gotcha. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Melody. At this time, we'll open the floor for any public comment. If we have any guests that have joined us on site, parents, community members, other entities. We do not have any on site. Do we have any joining us virtually that would like to raise any questions, concerns, challenges, triumphs? We like to hear good news as well. Public comment does not have to be bad comment. No problem. Joe, did we receive any public comments via email, text message,
No,
Facebook?
I just checked the SAPEC mailbox, and there were no comments in them.
I actually have a public comment. It's not often that with homeless education that it intersects, that at my level, I get to work with someone that's a special needs population, because the homeless liaisons too. But I recently did get to work alongside someone who's exiting and transitioning out. And I got to help a liaison figure out how, if you're not aware, the liaisons, if they're what's considered an unaccompanied youth, so either a runaway or they've left. I was an unaccompanied youth when my mom volunteered me to leave at 18. But this young person left home because things weren't good, and college wasn't the appropriate destination for them, but they had been taken in by another family, and they needed a letter of verification for their status to get independent status for extra financial aid. It's a whole thing. And we're sort of focusing on that as one of my passions. And it was really neat because this young person has some vocational passions and things. So it kind of intersects with this, and I was really excited. And it's probably all I can share, but I was really happy because at this level, that doesn't usually rise up, but it was really inspiring. So yeah.
Because you haven't been in your role long.
Here, yeah. So yeah, that was really cool.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Can I make a comment? That'll be okay with you? So I want to make a comment, because we don't have a KDE update in this one today, because we're gonna hear from the transition folks, which will be very exciting for you, I'm confident. But I did want to share that recently, the Office of Special Education and Early Learning received our annual determination from the U.S. Department of Education, which is essentially our report card for how well we've done with special education across the state. And I will start this by saying it's the work that occurs at the local level. And it's based on 17 indicators that are compliance, indicators of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, as well as results for students with disabilities. And so when we say results, we're talking about things like graduation, things that you don't measure on a test score, so to speak, or that are not, did you meet your 60-day timeline? Because that's compliance. So we did receive a meets determinations, and it's a very underwhelming way of saying that's the highest score that a state can receive. It's very anticlimactic, and I wish they would, be a little more celebratory over that. The thing that I want to share with you is that this is 14 consecutive years that Kentucky has received a meets requirement, which sounds, again, really underwhelming, but that's really, really incredible. There's only 2 states in the nation that have achieved this level for this many years in a row. And, I just want to publicly give a shout out to all of our local school districts, our leaders, our building and political administrators, our teachers, our parents, our bus drivers, everybody out there that enables students with disabilities to perform at higher rates. We still have a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. But the fact that, that we are meeting requirements, that's, it's something we should take a moment and celebrate. And it really is. And especially if we always think about all the work we have ahead of us, and we still do. Like, we don't let our guard down, we keep going. But we do need to celebrate the work that's been going on in Kentucky. And this year, there were, I think, 23 states and entities. Is that right? Yeah, 23 that received a meets, and that's out of 60 because the entities and territories, the Pacific Islands, those are counted. So it's third, which is it's a huge accomplishment for the state. So I just wanted to share that.
Yes. I echo those same sentiments. A lot of times, we don't talk about the collaborative effort, and it takes everybody, and from down to the bus drivers to the custodian. And it's hard work. We just know how to keep going. But congratulations. Thank you. I may volunteer. I'm going to call Jason Wheatley out just a minute. This is also a shout out to the staff within OCL, Jason Wheatley and Allison Johnson and Jonathan Compton, along with lots of other folks. I recently wrote the State Personnel Development Grant, which is a competitive grant that's submitted to USAID. They focused on transition, and we were recently awarded around $5.6 million for the next 5 years to focus on transition for students with disabilities. So that's super exciting. And, they did such a good job with that when as soon as they finished, I said, hey, y'all want to write another grant? So they have just submitted another transition grant to the tune of $10 million.
So let's all just keep our fingers crossed and hope that we get this one. It's a big one. So, I mean, these two grants together could be game changers.
Congratulations. I'm assuming she looking at you, but you look at Jay.
As long as I don't have to talk again.
Yeah,
That's
congratulations.
exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other public comment? I'm all about public praise and private criticism, just so you know. All right. Thank you guys for that. Again, we will continue to monitor those. We know it's the summertime, but Joe is turning this over to
Misty?
yes. So she'll be monitoring that box. We always want to encourage our community partners, our family, friends, parents, various entities that we serve, that this is their time. We work for them. And we don't know what we don't know. And this is their opportunity to allow us, while we don't get to make an opinion, it's an unbiased approach, but we want them to have the floor to do so during this time so we can act accordingly.
So in homeless education, we've started a bi-monthly newsletter. So if anyone would like to help co-write or submit an article to put out in front of the homeless liaisons, I would love to consider that, because I don't think that there's enough of a collaborate. And I don't have enough expertise. I was just an elementary school teacher, before I went on for terminal training. So my background, I was a co-teacher, with a special ed teacher, but I don't have extensive training in special education. So if anyone is ever interested in that, I would love to have that perspective added at some point. Because most of our liaisons are not teachers. So I think that is something they could benefit from.
And virtually, that was Zach Stumbo putting that humble plea out there. Well, we are closing our public comment session at this time. Again, thank you for those that share. Congratulations, KDE, with the work that you do with our children and their hours. They all belong to us. We can't do it without you and your support. Next, we will have the American Rescue Plan presentation featuring the ARP team, Jason Wheatley, Lynn Petrie, and Bill Bates. And Bill, when we went over this yesterday, I haven't met you in person, but they rave about you. So I lost sleep waiting on you today, just so you know.
Hope I step up. No, I told Joe this morning, I didn't start making some flood before we started.
They have said great things about you at the conference and everything.
Just glad y'all can join us today. We're so excited to hear your presentation.
Excuse me, this is April Miller on virtual. I'll be leaving the meeting at 5 till 10, and I'll return. I'll let you know when I return.
Okay, can I actually do an intercession at this time, because I need to vote to take Brian's resignation where I have a quorum.
I'll make a motion that we accept Brandon's resignation.
I have a motion on the floor to accept. Second, Tal. Any discussion? Are you guys ready for the question? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Me, aye. Now I can't vote, so I abstain. Motion passes that we accept Chair Lovell's resignation at effective, well, verbally accept on July 13, 2023. Thank you.
April, thanks for letting us know about that too. Appreciate it.
Okay, back to you, ARP team. Thank you for that intercession.
All right. Good morning. Thanks for having us here. My name is Jason Wheatley. I am serving as a post-secondary transition specialist with the Office of Special Education and Early Learning through the American Rescue Plan. Again, we're talking about those pandemic dollars that Kentucky has and the Kentucky Department of Education has that through September of 2024. So today we'll be providing you an update of some of the work that we are doing under that purview, focusing on transition and more specifically post-secondary transition for students with disabilities. Alongside me is my, we already know, phenomenal colleague, and I'll let him introduce himself.
I'm Bill Bates. I'm the Exceptional Child Education Consultant for Career Capable Education through the Office of Special Education, Early Learning, American Rescue Plan.
Right. So moving on, this slide is really to help frame what is probably going to be about the next 30 minutes, providing an update on the various initiatives and the intentionality that our team has in doing work in this space. So our overarching mission is to improve post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. And then the subtitle there, we'll see some common themes or ways that we might view this work. So the first lens that we use, both as a team and when we communicate outwardly, is this notion of transition education. This is something we borrow or stole, whatever word you prefer, from the National Technical Assistance Center for Transition, who has been a great partner in this work as we've looked to center Kentucky's momentum around nationally recognized best practices. So what is transition education? It is, again, that notion that centers us always in that transition is not an add-on. Transition is the fundamental basis of education. That's how we operate, we move forward, and we promote that understanding or that notion throughout our partnerships within these initiatives. The second part of that is career and technical education. Again, my phenomenal colleague, Bill Bates, will provide a lot of emphasis and updates in that area. What we know about career and technical education, again, we borrow or stole this knowledge from the National Technical Assistance Center for Transition, is that career and technical education, or CTE, is a research-based practice for a positive post-school outcome in post-secondary education for students with disabilities. We also know that career and technical education, or CTE, is an evidence-based practice for post-secondary employment for students with disabilities. So in beginning this work in 2021, we knew that there needed to be a lot of intentionality related to CTE on behalf of students with disabilities, accessing that experiential curriculum. We also knew that Kentucky has great momentum in career and technical education. There's a lot of wonderful work going on in that space, and it's a great time to be have those partnerships formalized both within the agency and across the Commonwealth. Again, I don't want to steal Bill's thunder with that. So we have United We Learn. It's very easy to align the work that we are doing alongside all of our stakeholders with post-school outcomes for students with disabilities to United We Learn. As we think about United We Learn as the vision for the future of education in Kentucky, and we think about the cornerstones of that work, of that vision being centered on community, it's easy to connect that work to where we're going. And then, of course, the American Rescue Plan, it's been a phenomenal opportunity both to work under the leadership of the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, as well as having funding available to do work. It's great to have that. It's not always an opportunity in education that we have. There we go. Sorry, had a slight issue with our clicker. So what you see, this is just a visual, and it's actually a visual that we're proud of. And kind of stepping back even from that, we're really proud of where this work has been, and we're even more proud about where this work is going, both in the next 5 months or with the award that Greta described earlier within the next 5 years. Transition for students with disabilities has a very positive trajectory that we're excited to be a part of. Along with that trajectory, with specific to the American Rescue Plan, you'll see on this slide a map, and the participating districts are the one in green. I probably should have specified that earlier. Like, wow, you all have a lot of work to do.
Thanks for the clarity.
Yeah, we'll have to remember that for a future presentation. But so again, we were charged to do great things when we obtained these positions, and Greta had casted a vision of leadership, and so as part of that, it was that this work needed to encompass the entire state. We needed to traverse all the regions of our state, and so we're excited about this map. We know that, and then again, this is just a list format of who is involved in this work. It does not identify necessarily, and this is specific to local education agencies, it does not identify which initiative that they are involved in, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So we don't have a lot of slides today, so we will probably, in your head, you're probably going to think, wow, if they have 20 slides, we spend 10 minutes on each slide, we're never going to get out of here. No, so we have a handful of slides that we hope to have a discussion around. One of our initiatives that is being celebrated nationally, we've most recently been asked to share this work with the Council for Special Education Administrators at the national level. We are sharing this work at the summit that the National Technical Assistance Center again puts on each year, along with a few other national conferences. This is work that has really put Kentucky in the spotlight in terms of transition education for our country. And this is the Post-School Predictor Implementation Project. So again, the National Technical Assistance Center for Transition, or NTACT, they have identified through a Delphi study, through research, 23 predictors that will have correlational relationship to a positive post-school outcome for students with disabilities. And on the next slide, we'll talk about what those 23 predictors are. What this project or this initiative really encompasses is the Kentucky Department of Education, or OCEAL, making a direct partnership with local education agencies. For this initiative, we're currently at 36 local education agencies. What we help lead and support our LEA district partners in doing is identifying a team, a local team, to focus on this phenomenon of transition, post-secondary transition for students with disabilities. So informed by both our team's professional practice as well as research, we know that this work can't happen just within the special education department of a school district or a special education program at the school district. We know that if we're going to really impact post-school outcomes for students with disabilities, it's important that we shatter that silo, that we're working more collaboratively at every level, both at the state and locally, to help change and improve lives into adulthood for students with disabilities. So identifying a team, so we enter into an agreement with the district, we identify that team. As part of that team, we have our directors of special education as required members. We have the local career and technical education administrator as a required member. We have counselors as required members, special education teachers as required members, general education teachers as required members. We are now evolving that work. So I'm going to bounce around just a little bit, but the bottom right of that slide. So this is a snapshot of year one. This year we are entering into year two. We really want to and are going to work to promote additional representation within these local teams. So on the bottom right, what you see is that we have 36 participating districts. There are 82 teachers throughout that. And my wife's an optometrist, and I think I need to go see her. 63 district support staff and 60 school administrators. You'll see we aren't well represented for students and parents and outside agencies. What we're most excited about where we're going is that this initiative specifically is going to be a great place for additional stakeholders to coalesce around a process, around data to help drive and improve outcomes for students. So what we're going to see in year two is more students represented on these teams, more parents represented on these teams, more outside agencies represented on these teams. And we know that there's going to be great work that comes of that. So once these districts, 36 districts, have their team, they complete a self-assessment. So as a most recent school district practitioner and administrator, I always felt, and we always felt, that we needed more information to help drive and inform our practice in this area. Kentucky has some exceptional programs for transition that support students with disabilities. But what we might not find is a comprehensive approach to that body of work. We might find pockets of excellence in different districts or in different parts of the state or in different programs or in different schools. So what we wanted to do was help promote a more comprehensive process that includes everybody to see how we are doing in providing transition education for students with disabilities. And also knowing that we aren't talking about, when we talk about transition, we aren't focusing on a specific subpopulation within our students with disabilities. We aren't focusing on, we aren't solely focusing on students that are going to college. We aren't solely focusing on students with moderate to severe disabilities working towards an alternative high school diploma. We're really, again, that notion of transition education, it's not an add-on. Transition needs to be a part of every student's educational experience. That is where this initiative is centered. And what's our norm here? Do we ask questions throughout, ask questions at the end? At the end, okay, we'll ask questions at the end. Thank you. Okay, so I had teased everybody, probably not, you weren't on the edge of your seat necessarily, about these 23 predictors of post-school success for students with disabilities. This is the work. So again, early on, when our American Rescue Plan project was initiated or began, first of all, we said, well, what are we supposed to do? This is an unprecedented opportunity. And with that, you can go a lot of different directions. And we knew that that direction could not solely be informed based on the context of Kentucky or our institutional organizational knowledge, our professional knowledge. We needed to make sure that, again, we aligned ourselves with what we knew from a national level, a national perspective. So all of our work is really centered around these 23 items that are categorized within 4 groups. You'll note that career and technical education is situated under career development. We'll provide a little specific emphasis on that today. But this is the path forward for our work in making sure that we are exemplar, exceptional, focusing on each and every one of these areas for each and every student. that is supported with an individual education program. All right, and so again, we had just concluded a year one. I say it's a year one, but it's not a true year one because those 36 districts, they have entered into agreements with us sort of in a staggered, on a staggered calendar there. But what we saw was very promising. Of course, we didn't put any of the negative comments on the slide. We'll, back to that private, what was your?
Public praise and private criticism.
Yes, I like that. So we kept that private. No, results were really positive. We're excited about having this direct impact on school districts and students on behalf of the agency. You can see in the first quote, it opened collaborative efforts and partnerships between our central office, middle school, high school, and Kentucky Tech to enhance supports, projects, materials, and focus for successful and targeted transition for CTE skills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, anecdotally, I'll report we have a lot of silos that we tend to operate within. What this is seeking to do is to eliminate those, and that first quote there, as we see central office, middle school, and high school, all intentionally focused and collaborating on behalf of transition for students with disabilities, that specific phenomenon. Our students, the second quote, our students had the opportunity to gain experiences within the community. Again, community experiences is one of those 23 predictors of post-school success. We have the third one, our team is energized, the opportunities our students will have next year. Again, that's kind of alluding to that late start for some of our districts, but they're not necessarily behind because we've already learned a lot that we're working to help guide them with that improved knowledge and that continuous improvement mindset. Our class schedule has been redesigned to increase the number of students who receive job coaching. So again, it required and encouraged districts, required and encouraged, can you say that in the same sentence? To really take a step back and look at how are we programming for all of our students with disabilities as it relates to transition. Okay, without further ado, my colleague, Bill Bates, will talk about career and technical education. And we got a little bit of a late start today. I've had a lot of coffee and Bill's already said I could chime in when appropriate.
Absolutely. And please bear with me. I'm on my second water and third cough drop. And after 25 years of taking multiple prescription drugs for allergies, I've recently learned that I don't have allergies. So working on this as we can. So I may have to drink every now and again. Thanks, Jason.
You mean water, not a drink. Water.
Water. A drink of water. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, if I'm considered phenomenal, I don't have a word that describes the people I work with each day on the ARP team. Greta and Tracy, just an amazing group. So when we look at career and technical education, we know that students need to meet either an academic or a career indicator to be post-secondary ready. So career and technical education combines workplace skills and hands-on academic content to meet career readiness in one of 5 options. It can be either an industry certification, into program assessment, CTE dual credit, to be through a co-op or an apprenticeship. And within career and technical education, we have 16 career clusters, and they represent 79 career pathways. And each of these pathways have programs of study in order to complete. So students in career and technical education pathways, when they start in, let's say they have one class, they're considered exploring students. When they successfully complete 2 classes, they're considered concentrators. If they complete the 4 classes approved within a pathway, then they're considered a completer. Having said that, students who complete the 2 classes and make it to the concentrator level have a 15% higher graduation rate than the national average. Having said that, students with disabilities who get upfront support, guidance, accommodations through other programs tend to have even a higher success rate than that. So a big part of what we do and what we are doing is looking at ways that we can better support students with disabilities in career tech ed programs. About a year ago this week, I had the opportunity to start this position, and thankful to Greta and Tracy and Jason and Lynn and the entire group. But the first thing, we had two priorities that our team wanted to do in this position, and that's better support students with disabilities and better support teachers, career technical education programs and pathways. So as we look at doing this, and I'll try to get back on track with the slide, and Jason will chime in and try to keep me guided and grounded. The Perkins 5 legislation, which is strengthening career and technical education for the 21st Century Act, it expands opportunities for every student to follow a CTE pathway. It specifically talks about special populations, which include individuals with disabilities. It also talks about integrated professional development. And we're excited, as you can see on the board this year, for the first time ever for the 2023 Kentucky CTE Summer Program through the Office of Career Technical Education Association for Career Technical Education. We are well represented in special education at this conference. We have multiple sessions that are focused on supporting students with disabilities. The conference theme this year is 12 elements of high quality CTE framework. Two specific items in that framework: the access and equity, and then prepared and effective program staff. So another component for us, and they're extremely excited about, is that we have 20 special education teachers that will be participating in the conference this year through the CTE Summer Program Special Education Professional Scholarship. So we will be working with these teachers from day one. We have a pre-conference cohort meeting. They will have mentors in career and tech ed to help guide them through the conference, and we'll be working and growing together to better serve students. A pilot that we're extremely proud of, that's been going for a year now, is the Garrett County Area Technology Center Outreach Coordinator Pilot. We're having tremendous success. The coordinator works to ensure that students with disabilities are included in the Area Technology Center recruitment and enrollment, that the students receive the support and enrollment process, that they're providing career awareness and accommodations, that faculty and staff are providing support for SDI. Students receive job shadowing opportunities, help develop student action plans toward career goals. This person attends the ARC meetings, communicates with parents and students on their AP, and reports the data. And we have the Garrett County Area Technology Center team is presenting a session on this pilot at the conference at the CTE Summer Program next week. And we currently have several programs in the East, Central, and the West regions that are submitting proposals in hopes of replicating this initiative in their areas. Immersive virtual reality, and we know that it helps to remove barriers for students with disabilities in education and employment. And research still shows that people with disabilities participate in the workforce at lower rates compared to those identified as not having ability. We know that from recent news that Kentucky ranks 4th in the nation, with employers struggling to hire people to fill positions. So we're currently looking, exploring IVR and career and technical education, reaching back as low as an elementary level for outreach and exposure and awareness and exploration, at the middle school level for orientation and engagement, involvement, participation, and then in the secondary level for increased access and experiences, and provide supports within pathways for completions and transitions. We are very fortunate that we are working not only with an expert, but I think Jason and I like to say with the expert in immersive virtual reality in the state of Kentucky, Dr. Shannon Putman. And she's helping us to implement this throughout the state. We currently have 30 programs, either area technology centers or career and technical centers across the state that are piloting immersive virtual reality to help us better support and better serve and better accommodate not only students with disabilities, but all students. When we started this rollout for this, we formed a steering committee, not only Jason Lynn and I, but we also have Division Director of Office of Career and Technical Education and their program consultant for each of their 3 regions. And we visited 4 sites, 4 area technology centers to meet with students and meet with teachers and not only learn about the excitement that they may have, concerns they may have, and the different views on how we may be able to use this and to better serve students. And I'm sure Jason can tell you that some were extremely excited, some were frightened. They hadn't used this technology. In almost every case, the students were all about it and were encouraging to the teachers and offered their support and helping the teachers learn how to learn the technology. So we have recently been doing on-site trials to make sure that this technology will work in our area technology centers. And Tuesday of this week had an extremely successful trial where the Engage program that will be for curriculum development worked beautifully, and also the Purview XR, so that we can have more career exploration. So in exploring and utilizing and looking at using these technologies, we want to be part of this wave of success that we see in the news just last week on CBS that we see that the employment population ratio for disabled individuals is now at a record high. We want to keep that momentum, add to that momentum, and make sure that we're moving forward and helping students, help them transition. And we are making, certainly feel like we're making a difference in a lot of ways, accommodating individuals with disabilities. And I think that we'll look at that on the next slide with purpose and action and some things that we've been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. So kind of circling back a little bit, like Bill described, on Tuesday, we were in Shelby County at their area technology center. And not only did we go there, we were on the top of a wind turbine doing electrical work. Not really. Of course, we were with immersive virtual reality. And if you're not familiar with immersive virtual reality, that's where you are putting that head-mounted display on, and you have a controller in each hand, at least in relation to the specific technology that is part of our implementation plan at these 24 or 30 locations across the state where we are working to pilot that this year. What our focus is again, back to students supported through an IEP, but then all students, is really that access and opportunity piece, providing students that might not have access to a wind turbine to see if that specific opportunity, career opportunity, would be of interest to them. That's probably not the best example, but it's just in my head because it scared me. And the immersive virtual reality is so amazing because you truly feel that you are a part of that environment. It's so real, it's so immersive, in that, when you are walking off a ledge in that environment, I got almost nauseous. So it's very cool in the sense that we know career exploration, career awareness, transition assessment specifically is embedded within each and every student's individual education program. The immersive virtual reality technology is going to really enhance that work and be there for students who might reside in communities that might not have the variety of opportunities available, or don't have the opportunity to get in a vehicle and go to an opportunity. So it's really bringing a very diverse set of opportunities and experiences into the hands of every student, teacher, or classroom that is being a part of this pilot. So we're really excited about that. Again, Bill talked, we did sort of a road tour in the beginning when we were considering the pilot. And again, we absolutely heard some apprehension from the field. And then after a conversation about what it is, it was amazing and surprising, to be honest, how quickly that apprehension alleviated. And when we have, a shop teacher who is not necessarily seeing the application of this technology to his or her curriculum and learning environment, leave our conversation on board and wanting to be one of the first people to pilot the technology. Again, back to Bill's point, some of that might be because his or her students were in the background saying, I'll teach you how to do it. Because, in situations where the curriculum is to work on a car engine, in this situation, the IVR technology will allow that teacher to get a specific car engine, so that if it's I'm not a car person, if it's a Lamborghini engine that we need to work on, that's available. That specific real life replica is available for that teacher and that student, and to be part of that curriculum plan. So again, really our focus is again, allowing more opportunities. If it's welding, we're practicing there are virtual welders, but the immersive part takes it to another level, where if we have a student that is not ready to specifically engage in that activity, the IVR technology allows them sort of a prerequisite activity to help practice and promote that, garnering those skills. And then, like Bill said, so the CTE summer program, and I think, again, a lot of our success with CTE, and we are feeling successful with CTE. Again, we're excited about where we've been, but we're more excited about where we're going, has been because of the collaboration and the leadership between OSEAL and the Office of Career and Technical Education. And again, Bill's ability to help foster that collaborative relationship between those offices. So we're modeling that collaboration at the state level, and seeing that collaboration be reciprocated locally across the state, which is really exciting, and we know is going to pay dividends for a long time for students with disabilities within that CTE, that work-based learning, that experiential real-life curriculum that we know is so meaningful, as supported by research and evidence. And like Bill said, there's essentially a special education track at TRACK at the CTE summer program. We're going to take pictures and have a great time. Joe, my clicker.
All right, so Jared, we made a switch. It makes it tough to be able to use the clicker. Can't see the presentation. Now, try. There we go. Thank you.
So Lynn Petrie, Dr. Petrie, was not able to be with us today. He had another obligation. He has really championed probably the most creative initiative idea that we would have been able to dream up. So United We Learn, Purpose in Action, specifically is the name of the initiative. You can see it's really focused on that community aspect, that creating a space where everybody can be successful. So Parker Hannifin is a Fortune 250 company out of Lexington. They make all kinds of things, including O-rings for space shuttles. And the Berea Makerspace, which is a community entity in Berea, where people can go to create and make things that they might not have the tools or the resources to make just available at their house. So it really leverages the collective as a resource there. So Essentially, Purpose in Action was a design challenge where Woodford County Public Schools, Berea Independent Schools, they worked with Parker Hannafin and Berea Makerspace to design a work cell and a prototype that would be utilized within Parker Hannafin. So the cool thing about this, well, Lynn's not here, I'm just going to say the cool thing about this is that prototype was really designed around being accessible and promoting access to that specific work environment within Parker for people with disabilities. So a student team from Woodford and a student team from Berea Independent, they competed against each other to design what would be a work cell that Parker could then create an industrial model around that would be accessible for people with disabilities. And the great part of that learning process that ensued was that we found that when we make, it goes back to that universal design for learning, when we make environments and when we make things accessible, it really benefits everybody. So when we make things accommodating, it really makes things better for everybody. So it was a phenomenal learning experience. It was really situated around that partnership piece. I think I have another slide for this. No, that's okay. Another initiative that we have, almost $1 million have been awarded directly to students who had IEPs or who were served by an individual education program that were going on to some type of post-secondary education or training programs. So probably a little unorthodox type of scholarship opportunity, something that, and we felt like this would happen, and it did. There was a lot of excitement locally, and we know that because this was our second year offering that. You can see in 2023, we had 306 students who earned that $2,500 scholarship. And then we had 87 students the year before. So you can see our growth there, which is, again, almost $1 million when you look at the total. But again, these are students who they were served by an individual education program. They were graduating in that year, and then they had also obtained post-secondary readiness status in either college or career. So that's something we were really excited about. We've had a lot of stories. I think we've even had most recently students were sending thank you cards and postcards, and just allowing us opportunities to celebrate alongside them and be a part of their success in going on. So thank you all very much. We hope that there will be a future opportunity, again, maybe maybe next year, maybe in a few months, for us to come back and provide more of an update about where we've gone most recently and where we're continuing to go, because I promise you it's not going to be the exact same version or regurgitated information. We intend to enact real change. We are tasked with that, and we appreciate all of the partnerships along the way. And we know that in the field of transition, the interagency work is really important, and the work of a large group, diverse group of stakeholders is really important. So thank you.
Thank you, ARC team. We do have questions at this time for ARC. If we'll start with those joining us virtually. If you have any questions for the ARC team, you can unmute. We still have the slide up, so if you can just unmute and ask your questions at this time.
Stop sharing.
Hi, this is Tracy Brewer. This sounds like phenomenal work, and thank you for sharing it with us. and I love that you're working with students who are currently on an IEP. Do you have any stats on, do you work with any students in the 1% population?
Yes, absolutely. So as part of our initiatives, we are and we are focused on the entire population of students with disabilities who are served by an IEP. And so while we might not be, none of our initiatives specifically focus to date. None of our initiatives specifically focus on what you referred to as the 1%. But that doesn't mean we are exclusive of, if that makes sense. And that was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions virtually? Now we'll open up the floor in person on site. Dumbo.
I was just wondering how you recruited or selected the districts. Just looking at the map, it looked like there weren't a lot of large population districts in there yet, like Louisville or Kentucky. And so I was wondering if that was intentional or if that was like the next iteration thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of our district partnerships have come at the request of districts themselves, seeking our partnership or support. We do have, and I think that the slide with the map even said American Rescue Plan ARP, a growing opportunity. I know we do have, Bill has championed work most recently, I think in Jefferson with our immersive virtual reality pilot. So there hasn't been necessarily an avoidance of larger districts. It's just probably has worked out that maybe they haven't requested our support. Most of our partnerships have come at district request.
I guess I'm just asking because like there are 4,581 students with IEPs that are homeless in the state last count, and 207 that were 12th grade the last count. Most of those would be in high population centers, except for Harlan, which I think is one of your districts. Is that what Harlan County?
Yes.
And
Yes. Harlan. Yes.
Okay. So that is one of the high centers in the state. So I was just curious.
Yeah, it's a great.
Along those same lines, I had a question about the selection process for teachers. How are they selected to participate in the program?
So with I'll probably just, and if I miss something, feel free to just let me know. So specific to our, I'll go over a few of them. Specific to our special education, career and technical education scholarship, where we are excited to be next week having 20 special education professionals attend to that CTE summer conference. That opportunity was advertised both within the Office of Career and Technical Education's communication channels or listserv, as well as OSEAL's communications and listserv to directors of special education. So that was pushed out through those communication modes to advertise the opportunity. And then with the predictor implementation project, where I think we saw like 82 teachers were represented, those teachers were identified locally. So the agreement, the partnership agreement went to the district, and then district leadership. And if I was going to say, they probably all did it differently, but that was a local decision.
Because we do have principals, superintendent, and if they're looking for something special, they may do it.
I could chime in on the special education scholarships for the CTE summer program. Is that having 20 is a huge step forward currently. That there are not a lot of area technology centers, career technology centers that have full-time special education teachers on site while at all times. So the fact that we have 20 that are wanting to move in this direction is a huge step. Is a huge first step.
And hopefully other districts can see that it can be done. And then that'll help them, motivate them to move in that area too, to say, hey, we're seeing great results. Let's try that over here.
And thank you guys. My daughter is the recipient of the 2023 Power by Fusion Scholarship. That's to my joy. Thank you.
So, yeah. Exciting.
Any other questions?
I would like, I was lucky enough to sit in on your presentation at our last conference. Well, and would you talk a little bit about the transition program at Garrett County and kind of how the transition part of it, how they're transitioning from that program on?
You know, the students.
Yes.
And Jason, you may tell me on this, and we lean on Shauna a lot, that information. Garrett County, and it's extremely important that with your career and tech ed centers, not just for serving students with disabilities, but for all students, you have to have partnerships in industry. There has to be something at the end, and I know that even when I interviewed for this position, I said I'm completely guilty because I was a special education teacher and also a career tech ed teacher, and I had a automation engineering pathway. And when our first student out of that pathway, he was a completer. He passed industry certification, student with an AP, and I thought, my goodness, this is amazing. And then he's going to have a successful career and he's going to move on to employment. I saw him a year later and I said, how's it going? He said, well, I'm still bagging groceries at Kroger. That was on me because I hadn't worked on the back end with business and industry to have employment opportunities for the students when they finish the program. Garrett County is a perfect example of working with different organizations, different companies within their area, within their district, within their region, and also gearing their pathways and their programs towards what these companies would want. So when students with disabilities, when all students transition through a pathway, they have an opportunity to gain employment at the end. And I think that's the question you're asking.
Yeah. I just, and when you all did your presentation, just the success rate of that was just amazing.
It's amazing.
And the fact that they go on to Gainesville, it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
So, and I would assume leadership is a major component of doing that, having leaders who carry that through and see the opportunity and maybe take the extra step. I know Superintendent Kevin Stoll there in Garrett County. He's been a part of our team before, and so he gets it with special education. So I just think leaders having that expertise and know how to be able to do that is critical.
And everyone being on the same page. That's the beauty of Garrett County and the beauty of all the programs that are working well is that the superintendent, the director of special education, the area technology center principal, the counselors, the community, everyone's involved in making it a success. So you're absolutely right.
So with your slide 2, you mentioned about, stakeholder buy-in, outside entities, more parents, and, collectively, the SAPEC group represent those various entities. So how as a body, and you might not know the question now, and I can't believe Tal hasn't said anything because we're on transition. He probably over there typing me a memo or something to share in our committee meetings later because I know it. How can we be a piece of the puzzle? What can we do as a committee? Because we're on the transitional team, of course, but how can we help? What role can we play? Because obviously you only had 2 outside entities, 2 parents. You got 6 of us in the room right now and 8 online. So how can we help? Like, what role can we serve? Or think about that, bring it back to us next meeting, and we'll be ready to work. How about that? Is that fair?
So that right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, and selfishly, I mean, I think we'll all probably do this or else something gonna look really bad. But whenever you have an opportunity, you're like, okay, well, what can I get out of it?
Yeah.
And you know, we're always thinking about transition education as our focus, as our center. And so, you know, that's a great question. And we did identify, you're right, the need for additional stakeholder involvement. We've formalized an opportunity for entry into that planning process and that assessment process. And now within our partnerships and beyond in year 2, you know, we're really going to emphasize that. And we will come back with a specific ASK.
And within CTE, and like part of what you were talking about too, is that the position in Garrett County is an outreach coordinator. So they're trying to reach out and include more people in this common purpose. So yeah, we'll try to have more information on
Yeah,
that.
please do.
How the best work and what's working well and what we could.
Because David brought it back. He's on the stakeholder engagement committee, and he brought it back to us at the November meeting. Shared that at conference. He brought that back to us. So we were delighted again that you guys could join us in person live. Jason, you're just as great and amazing.
Yeah, Chief, I can't feel left out. We've been making it.
Any more questions in person, comments? Well, again, thank you.
I'm sorry. I just had a question. Are you all in contact with Human Development Institute about their Youth 1 Year Out project? Because I would think this may affect those numbers, hopefully for the better.
We are. So kind of connecting back to our prediction project. We recognize both through our professional practice as well as through conversations throughout the state that practitioners really needed. So we're talking about Youth 1 Year Out. We're talking about post-school data, post-school outcome data. Practitioners, especially in some districts where response rates might not necessarily be high enough to completely inform professional practice and the development of transition programming locally. We have encouraged through that project really a triangulation of data that's available, which would include the Youth 1 Year Out project, as well as self-assessment data, as well as post-secondary readiness data that might live within the district and its subpopulations. And we have great partnerships with Dr. LoBianco and that team. And, you know, again, it kind of falls back into where I think OSEAL is situated, and Greta was providing that report card, so to speak, update in terms of, you know, OSEAL already has a lot of those structures in place to be collaborating at a great level with or partner organizations like the Human Development Institute and specifically the Youth 1 Year Out. So it's something that we always, each and every year and each and every month, want to consider and work with and lean on as much as possible. So yes, we are. Thank you.
Great. That's good to hear. I hope those we see improvement in those numbers thanks to your all's work.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're really we are hoping that as well. I think that would be a great testament.
Thanks for that, Tracy. Again, thank you, ARP team, and let us know how we can help. Looking forward to getting everybody on board to make an impact. So at this time, we will take, let's do a 10-minute break and report back at 10:55. And Jared, you and your team will be with the CEIS and CCIS updates.
Thanks a lot. We're going to go on mute, take a break.
Next up, we have Mr. Jared Sloan, to CEIS and CCEIS. Thanks so much for always joining us.
Oh, Dr. East, thank you. I appreciate you all taking the time out. For those of y'all who've been here with me before, you know that I come to you annually, typically about this time every year to do my presentation and talk to you about where we are in terms of comprehensive coordinated early intervening services. It is a very complex item, to be perfectly frank. But what I'm going to do today is do my best to try to walk you through what it is, how it works, and I'm going to try to do that in about 30 minutes. So that's a pretty interesting task, to say the least. So significant disproportionality is just one measure of equity in special education. So what we're required by federal law to do is look at students from a racial group who are identified for special education, placed in more restrictive settings, or disciplined at markedly higher rates than their peers. So the federal government in the reg considers disproportionality significant when overrepresentation exceeds a threshold defined by each state. So I'll talk a little bit more in specifics here in a moment about what our threshold currently is in Kentucky and how that's applied to districts. So the fun part here, and this is my fun fact of the day, is that when we look at these different areas, we look at all the federal racial categories and across 14 separate categories within those. So each district in the state of Kentucky is examined for 98 different ways they could be determined to be significantly disproportionate. So we actually have a lovely spreadsheet that our friend Chris Thacker developed a couple of years ago. And this spreadsheet, as you all can imagine, is fun for all 171 schools and districts in 98 different ways. So we do those calculations. Amy Patterson with our office preps that data. Chris Thacker also helps as well. And then I get my fun in the mix as well. So again, we're looking at identification, placement, and behavior in those 98 different ways. When we're looking just at identification, we look at 7 different categories. We look at identification as just a child with a disability. Then we look at 6 specific disabilities: FMD, MFD, EBD, OHI, SLD, autism, and speech or language impairment. Keep in mind that a district can be found to be significantly disproportionate in several of these. So it is entirely possible for a district to have multiple identifications in multiple areas. For placement, we look at placement in the regular class setting less than 40% of the day, and placement in a separate school or residential facility. I will tell you all that this is the least occurring one in Kentucky. I've been doing and working with this off and on for around 6 to 7 years now. We've never had a district identified in this category. So that's a positive for all of us. Finally, we look at removals of children with disabilities from their educational setting due to a disciplinary event. So 5 different ways. In school, less than or equal to 10 days. Out of school, less than or equal to 10 days. Then in school, greater than 10, out of school, greater than 10, and total removals. That last one is the one, the total removals is the one that we have the highest rate overall. Going back to identification, I should have mentioned this. It's the FMD, MMD identification. Those are our 2 highest areas data-wise in terms of significant disproportionality. So in Kentucky, and back in 2018, it was brought to the panel for advisement on this. The reg back in 2016-17 required us to set the definitions for determining
that significant disproportionality. So in Kentucky, we have a minimum cell size of 10, so that has to have the number of students identified in the area examined. So going back to that, we talked about a few minutes ago with the different categories. And then there has to be a total potential, the number of students who could have been identified of 30. If they don't meet that in size, then there's something called alternate risk ratio that gets applied. So that applies typically in smaller rural districts and independents because they have the smaller overall enrollment, or it's largely homogeneous in nature. So largely white, largely black, whatever that might be. So the risk ratio in Kentucky is 3.000. That means what we will do is we'll compare all, and I'll give you an example here. So we're talking about FMD, MMD. We'll compare all white FMD, MMD students in the district to all non-white, black to non-black, Asian to non-Asian. Again, if we don't meet that cell size that we just talked about on the previous page, it gets compared to statewide average data. So if, let's say that you're in a small rural district and you have an FMD, MMD population of 6.5%, the state rate on average is 1.71. So you would take your 6.5%, divide that by 1.71, and that would give you the risk ratio. That's going to be above the 3.000 threshold. So in order to be identified, there has to be a systemic over-identification, over-disciplinary action for these students. So again, they also have to exceed this for 3 years. So right now, the data that you're going to see here in a moment is based on identification for child count from this past year, December 1. So December 1, 22, December 1, 21, December 1, 20 for identification. For behavior, we're a year behind. I know you are like, this is so much fun. This is, I understand. The other thing that we've been able to build in, and it was part of the flexibility of it, is districts can, if they make reasonable progress year over year. So we talked about those data periods. So from the 20 to 21 child count and the 21 to 22 child count, they made reasonable progress and reduced their risk ratio by equal to or greater than 0.050. They remain significantly disproportionate, but they're not required to implement CCEIs. What is that? See, look how I have this set up for second class. So again, what districts have to do, they do not FASTGO, they do not collect $200. They have to set aside, once they're found to be required to implement CCEIS, exactly 15% of their IDEA federal funds, Part B and preschool combined, to look at a root cause analysis and work on the root cause of why they're either A, over-identifying, placing, improperly placing necessarily, and over-disciplining the area for which they've been identified. So this is a financial penalty. Now, there's a lot of asterisks that I can put here, but the point is, this money doesn't get lost because a lot of districts will take that and think that that's what's happening. It just has to be put aside to work specifically on why it's happening. So children ages 3 through grade 12, either regular ed or special ed, can be served with these funds. The difference is here that non-special ed students have to have a risk factor or how they may be in, either identified for whatever category. So let's say it's FMD, MMD. They may be identified in the future. So you look at your multi-tiered systems of support, your tier 2, your tier 3 kids. Is there something that's causing us in what we're doing or how we're doing it to over-identify these kids and refer them to special ed? When you're looking at behavior, is there an implicit or an explicit bias in how we're approaching how we discipline these students for special education that's causing them to be over-disciplined in that area? So we have a pretty robust process in the state for how we approach the root cause analysis. So, and again, this is kind of in a nutshell more than anything. The requirements are that they have to have a leadership team and a stakeholder team that advises the district on how to make these improvements. They are part of that root cause process. Currently, we're actually making a little bit of a change this year because we found to focus too much on, and I always talk about proactive and reactive approaches. The proactive being your tier 2, your tier 3, either behavior or your academic. And then the reactive being once they've been found to be special ed, or have they been identified appropriately? Are they being treated equitably in terms of behavior? So again, we're talking about Black, non-Black, white, non-white, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a data-driven approach. We use the IDEA Data Center, which is one of our technical assistance centers. We use a lot of their tools, and actually their folks are coming in next week to assist in our new district training. And we do that. We'll do that on site here next week. It's a 2-day training and mini conference where we provide guidance, access, and tools to our districts on how to make those improvements and engage stakeholders. And then ultimately, there's an improvement plan that local districts will develop and submit as to how they're going to make those improvements. The implementation side, they do forward and backward planning. The other thing, and I'll make sure to mention this, is that we provide through our office technical support through our technical assistance partners. So we work pretty robustly. One of the folks that we partner with is Kentucky Avery, the academic and behavioral specialist, to work with these districts, particularly the new districts, on how to implement the change that's going to really make a change in the district. So that's one of the, I think, the positive pieces that we've done. We also work with our Special Education Regional Technical Assistance Centers, our CERTACs, and our RTCs to provide supports for those districts. And then I work with them as well. So, we've tried to do more of a wraparound approach where this is concerned so that they will see what they're doing is making a difference and also to make improvements as a whole. Additionally, we also have quarterly PLCs and professional learning where we support those districts. This is kind of a breakdown of the role of each of our units and what we do and how we do it. We provide guidance and support. We coordinate federal requirements and compliance for program data and finance, and then we facilitate the PLCs and trainings. Our CERTACs and our RTCs provide training and support and may review behavior incidents and provide support upon request from that district. And then finally, Kentucky Avery helps with our logistics and coordination and support. So here is what I want to share, and this is what the data that I share annually with you all. So keep in mind, again, as I said, if you look at that number there for white, that is comparing the white to non-white. So on the left, you'll see, and what I've done is I've just looked at the districts and the areas of identification in the state for this 23-24 school. As you'll notice, as far as we're slightly higher above a you always want to be at 1.0. That's where you want to be to show that everything is equitable. For white, we're a little bit above that 1.0 threshold. I will tell you that data shows us that it is typically rural areas in the state that are above or over identifying intellectual disability students. That's your FMD, MMD. You'll notice though that we do have two districts identified for Black FMD, MMD, and that one is our highest on the scale. That means that in that district, and when you see Black, that's typically a regular risk ratio. So if you look at District B on the screen, that means that that district is identifying Black FMD, MMD students at a ratio of 5.733 to all other races in that district. So that's a pretty significant number. Obviously, anything above 3.0 will be significant. So you can see there across the board, our two Black FMD districts, FMD, MMD districts, are our highest at 5.733 and 3.962. We do have some white districts. We've got 3 of those. That is my number one with a bullet. That's the highest. You'll see here in a moment on a slide, we have 12 districts identified in 13 areas. 5 of those 13 come from FMD, MMD over identification. SLD, you can see here that as a state, it's kind of all over the place. We do have some folks who are under-identified, some folks who are over-identified, but you'll notice that both of those districts for SLD are white SLD over-identification as well. OHI, this is the one where it's interesting to look at the underlying data. But if you notice in this category, again, comparing all Black to non-Black, it's a risk ratio of 1.445. So that is the highest on this scale. We could talk about some underlying root causes, but that's a discussion for another day. But that is by far our highest number in terms of identification categories. So if you are a Black OHI student in the state of Kentucky, that means you're 1.445 times as likely to be identified as all other races. You'll see we have one district that's identified as white at 3.546. Emotional disturbance, I'll point this out to you again. If you'll notice, if you are a Black emotional disturbance student, you're almost 2 times as likely to be identified as all other races combined. You'll see that Native, relatively smaller population. That's the reason that one's a little bit less. But you'll notice too that multiple is at 1.5. But our one district is a white emotional disturbance district, and they're at a 3.802 risk ratio. So here we're looking at total removals. We don't currently have any other behavior category identified other than total removals. However, I will point out to you, if you are a Black special education student, you are 4.410 times as likely to be subject to a disciplinary removal as all other races combined. Over on the side, you'll notice that I have a note. Our 3 districts identified for this next year are all Black removal districts. The 3 districts that you see there on the screen make up 76.4% of Black special education removals, but they represent 61.4% of the population. So those 3 districts account for more than 3/4 of the total removals in the state of Kentucky of Black special education students. So I thought it important to include that for you all for context. I will tell you that there is some phenomenal work happening in one of those is a new district. Two of those, actually, I take that back. One is a new district. One, this will be their second year, and the other one is a longer term district. But there have been some changes in administration in some of these districts, and there's a lot of great things happening within those districts, and we're seeing those numbers come down phenomenal. One of these districts, if we were sitting here 3 years ago, that number would have been 7. So even though that does seem a little shocking to look at, they have leaps and bounds worked on these items. So in all, we have 13 total identifications in 12 districts. 7 are alternate risk ratio. 5 are risk ratio. We do have intellectual disability, 3 white, alternate risk ratio, 2 black. And you all have seen that data on those previous slides. So we also have what's called voluntary coordinated early intervening services. Districts can elect to use up to 15% of their funds to voluntarily work on an area that they might see themselves potentially being identified in the future. It can only be used on non-special education students. So you're taking special education funds and you're saying, okay, we see this coming. Let's work on some of this before it gets to a point where we have to set aside these funds. They have to provide professional development and educational and behavioral evaluation supports and services, including scientifically based literacy instruction. That's straight from the RAG. So this current year, we have 3 districts who have elected voluntary. We have 3 total districts who are year 2 districts. So again, if they continue on the path they're on, they could potentially be identified next year and required to set aside the funds. So of those 3 districts, 2 have elected to enroll in voluntary. So they've said, okay, we see this coming. We're going to work on it with these funds. 2 of those are there. 1 district is a former district, but they currently do not have any areas of significant disproportionality, but they've elected to work on these items. All righty. Questions, comments, concerns?
Thank you so much. That's a lot to take in, but I almost barely have a grasp on it. One question, when you say total removal, what does that mean? So they're suspended, they're sent home. What does that mean?
There are, in our safe schools definitions, there's a number of areas. Again, that's anything that removes the student from the least restrictive environment is how the definition reads. So anytime an Infinite Campus that a child is removed, a special education student is removed from the classroom, that counts as an incident. So you're counting the number of removals from that LRE as opposed to, the number of incidents. So let's say that I have a child in there that gets sent to the office. That counts as a removal. Let's say that I keep, whatever counts is the removal from the least restrictive environment counts as a removal.
And it does calculate that, like it does percentages of your day and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I might
Okay.
add this.
Thanks.
Might add that this is the only category that counts something other than students. It's counting the events of the students, where everything else is an unduplicated count of the kids themselves. So here, Johnny might show up 10 times because he had 10 removals, whereas in the other areas, you'd only count 9.
Thank you. That helps.
I think 2 questions. Okay. The easy one is, do you all ever disaggregate and look at it by sex, like past just these racial categories?
No, the way the reg reads, this is how we analyze it, but I personally break it. What I'll do is I'll work with the district to say, okay, let's look and see at your district data, and let's see, are there grade levels? Are there classrooms? Are there specific folks who are doing the referrals for a behavior? Or, within a school, I mean, we might have a school that's doing 3 times another school in the district for FMD, MMD. And so what we'll do is we'll work with the districts to help them learn how to break that down.
I guess my other question does probably bleed into the OHI with the Black community, but also other things it could. If there were a category where there were prevailing outside forces leading into identification, maybe environmental factors or things like that, which some people, I think in some research would suggest that that could be part of communities, especially impoverished communities, why you might have certain communities being able to identify health risks and things like that. What happens then?
I mean, obviously, the determination is left up to the local district in terms of looking at that. What we do and what's required in the reg is that they look at their policies, practices, and procedures to see that what they're doing is in compliance with the regulation. So it may be that when the district, and again, this is the district doing the root cause, and we're helping to guide them through that. It may be that external factors are part of why they're referring. Because I mean, I will tell you, so a lot of our districts have said, okay, it's a poverty issue, or it's, we'll look at free and reduced lunch numbers, or we'll look at any number of things. It's pretty comprehensive. As I said, it's a wraparound approach. So we're looking at all that to see, is there in that root cause, what are the extenuating factors that are pushing on possible over-identification, or is it that they're not properly identifying the kids in another category is where they fit? Or, again, it's all about training for those art chairs, for the district staff, for the principals, for the teachers, even for the parents to understand what needs to happen when.
And sorry, I didn't. One final thing. I'm curious to know, do you all ever look at what happens after something like this? Does achievement improve or does it go down? I'm wondering, 15% is a lot of money to take away. And if they have to eliminate staff or something like that, what happens long-term to a district?
Well, we're actually required to track these students for the next 3 years.
Okay.
So, for instance, if we've got this next year and they're using their money, districts will flag at Infinite Campus those students, and then we track to see what ultimately is the outcome for that student. Are they, if they use it on a non-special education student, are they eventually referred? What are they referred for? Also on the back end, we look to see if they are a special education student, what happens to them? Are they exited? And again, we have to track those. That's part of the requirements. We track those for 3 years.
So I got a couple of questions, Sherry, too, with the OHI. So is it just encompassing those other identified disabilities that are not factored into that other categories? Because I mean, it's the scope. The ones that were selected were kind of just, I don't know how they were picked. How are they picked? Because then what do you do with the other disparities, their classification?
Well, and again, Dr. East, that goes back to, the training with the districts is what is truly an OHI student? Are they following the fidelity of the referrals? Are they looking at all the extenuating factors? Are they looking at the data? What are they looking at to make those determinations? And is it really a proper identification? And that's really, at the end of the day, the first thing that I would say to a district is they'll say, well, the data are what the data are, and we can't change them. Okay, well, let's look and see. Let's do the file reviews. Let's look and see what does your special design instruction look like? What do all these factors? Are you really looking at eligibility fully to make an informed decision? And that's the key. Is some folks are not necessarily schooled per se in how and why and what those policies, practices, and procedures should be and what they are. And what we'll find a lot of times is there will be miscommunication, or there will be some sort of misunderstanding, or there'll just be a lack of guidance or knowledge on what actually constitutes some of these.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think, for me, in, the capacity that I serve, especially on this committee, is as a parent. And you don't have visual impairments on it. You don't have hearing impairment. And that's not to say that they don't have disciplinary issues. Granted, I'm glad they may not have a lot, but they got a few, I'm sure, right? And those are the areas that we're excelling. But when they're not listed as the category, how do we know?
Now, that's only for identification. If they're a special education student,
Yeah.
The behavior piece applies. So if they have an IEP, they're counted in the discipline.
Yeah.
And those are all set by the federal reg. We didn't set those or anything, but the ones that you saw, the categories are all set by federal reg.
Gotcha.
Yep.
I have a follow-up question to some of the things you guys were talking about. So when you said you were tracking those kids several years out from that data, do districts get that data back, or do they have to go find that data? And then I was thinking in regards to this, I think you kind of asked this a little bit, but like academic, you did say, like, do they exit special education? We would assume that their academic status would continue to increase, and they would be successful as they exit. But is that data available too? Like, once they were identified, were they more successful academically, even if it was this disproportionate category? Does that make sense?
And that's a great question. It really, at that point, it is up to the district to track in terms of that. We do what we're required to do by the reg, but we try to build with those districts a pretty robust and change the climate culture where that's part of their process, so that they're looking to see where do those students end up eventually. And actually, one of the things I talked to those districts about is, even if they're, you can pull the ad hoc that lists these kids and then see where they are. So they have the availability to pull the reports on their own and track those students. So, right now we report those students who have been identified to OSEP. So, but we do track those for that 3-year period.
If I'm not into the data that we get on those students, puts them into Infinite Campus. Jimmy, Johnny, and Susie received a benefit from CEIS. So they have that in their system and track those students themselves. We track it here because we have to report to OSEP if those kids that receive benefit of CEIS were not children with disabilities over the next 3 years, were they later identified? So that's what we have to.
Another question regarding the data that you do have, and Zach was kind of going along the lines with maybe SES, the environmental factors, but I would be interested to see with those disproportionality districts, the teachers, because me as a parent of a student of color, if I don't see anybody that looks like me, how can they relate to me? So that would be a recruiting mechanism and even at the conference, I don't see many SPED teachers of color. I ain't trying to go back into the classroom. Yeah. But, and I think you could do a deeper dive to say, and they very well, I am a 70s baby, and when I started school in the 80s, we still had segregated bus schedules. And my daughter did not have a person of color until she got to high school. And that was 2019, maybe, I don't know, not that long ago. But I think when we look into those factors and try to find that, codify why this is happening, it could be a recruiting tool to say, we noticed this, we recognize this, and we need more, and that could be even in, a reversal, whatever the need is. I think it goes back to our teachers.
Well, and a lot of our districts do work with their equity. I mean, we're lucky, particularly in those that are some of the larger districts. They do have equity offices and equity officers that they work with. And they're part of that stakeholder team. I can tell you, and obviously not being able to specifically talk about which districts they are and what have you. But they do have a connection with diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, with those equity pieces.
Any other questions? How long has the department been collecting this data? Specifically,
Well, it's 2009, Chris. Is that the first year?
Well, that's an excellent question. In 2016, the regulation changed what the way we're doing it now. The CEIS, which is the 1C, has been around since probably 2009, maybe a little bit earlier. The data that is used to make these calculations, we've captured that for years. The requirement for CEIS just didn't appear, I think, until shortly after the 2004 reauthorization of the IDA and the regulation that followed that. But that's when CEIS became a requirement. Then in 2016, they changed the regulations to get into significant disproportionality and requiring the use of the risk ratio and the alternate risk ratio, making it across states to some degree. It also gave states a lot of flexibility in how we define that risk ratio threshold, the cell size, in size, so all we set parameters on cell size, and size. We chose to use the 3 years. That was a flexibility that we were given. And that reasonable progress that Jared mentioned, where a district that has significant disproportionality may not have to reserve if they've been showing some improvement. But the data has been around for years. It's just not been required in these schools.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions virtually? Jared's contact information is on the board. Again, thank you for providing that update, and we appreciate the partnership with you and your team. The analytics and the commentary you provide us with that is always helpful moving forward. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Next up, we have IDEA fiscal update from Mr. Jonathan Compton. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good to see everyone. My name is Jonathan Compton, and I am an IDEA fiscal liaison with OSIL. And I wanted to talk to you all today and was going to give you just a brief overview of our IDEA fiscal monitoring process. In recent years, OSEP has had an extended focus on subrecipient monitoring, which is basically LEA or district monitoring on the fiscal side. And we have developed a extensive process as far as fiscal monitoring goes in dealing with all of our districts in Kentucky. There's 171 districts in our state that are subject to this IDEA fiscal monitoring. And with our process, we plan and will go to all districts in the state, and they will all receive this monitoring. As far as the background goes on our IDEA fiscal monitoring, we started out in the spring of 2021 with 5 pilot districts, and we worked with 5 pilot districts going through the process, ironing out just everything and developing a process for that first year. From that, we've evolved each year in trying to improve upon our process, making changes. Our first full year cycle ended in June of 22, and then we're just finishing up now our second full year cycle, which began in the fall and is again just ending at the end of the fiscal year, but we're just finishing that up now. And we're also working on selecting new districts for our next cycle, which will begin this fall. As far as our procedure goes, we started out by developing an extensive IDEA fiscal manual that we provide to all of our districts. And it's an A to Z of everything you can think of IDEA fiscal that we give to our districts, the finance directors, their finance staff, the directors of special ed, et cetera, around everything IDEA fiscal. We also developed a risk assessment tool in selection of districts for each year for our monitoring. And that risk assessment tool looks at a variety of different things. It looks at previous consolidated monitoring. It looks at our IDEA programmatic monitoring. It looks at the percent of students identified, or the percent of students identified as students with disabilities, the percent of students in the least restrictive environment. And then it also looks at a couple of big fiscal areas. It looks at the amount of federal funds they received on the IDEA side. And then it also looks at maintenance of effort, which is a big piece on the fiscal side for IDEA. And it takes account a lot of factors there. And those are some of the big factors. And then from that, we select around 15 or so districts each year to be monitored. But again, this is a little different than programmatic monitoring in that all districts in our state will be monitored and it's required. And, we plan to go through all of them as far as giving them receiving this IDEA fiscal monitoring. As far as just a brief overview of what the monitoring entails, we start out by naming a liaison that we work with within the district. Typically, that's the finance director, but it's also the director of special ed a lot of times as well. But we work extensively with both of them, as well as fiscal staff, other special ed related staff, payroll staff, just a lot of different staff we work on throughout this process. We give them a pre-monitoring interview, and that usually is just with the finance director and the DOS. We have extensive subsequent interviews going throughout the process with each district that we monitor. We look at professional staff data and classified staff data. The financial system within Kentucky that all districts use is Munis. And we get read-only Munis access from each district. And we will go into Munis and pull a lot of information. And we try to make it we try to be as easy on the districts here as possible. And we go in and try to pull as much information as we can. And then when we need additional information from the district, we will ask them to provide that Munis information to us. And we look at all of that information, contracts, files, invoices, again, all that professional staff data, just lots of different fiscal data that you can think of that we go through. And then we also look at their MOE data, where they submit different pieces through their maintenance of effort. And maintenance of effort, I'll go ahead and expound on that a bit. That is a big piece. And it's also a support that we give to our districts, an additional support that we give to our districts in, training and just helping them throughout that process. But maintenance of effort is, the gist of it is, a district must spend at least as much state and local funds, so that's their general fund, during the current fiscal year, as they did during the previous fiscal year to support students with disabilities. So the general theme of it is they must spend at least as much out of their general fund to support students with disabilities during the current year as they did during the highest previous year. In saying that, there's a lot of requirements around it. There's a lot of pieces. It gets really complicated, and we provide support to our districts. I was actually in a district yesterday meeting with them around their MOE and also, future budget planning. But we try to provide a lot of support to our districts because with maintenance of effort, what can happen? There's 4 tests, and if you don't meet any of the 4 tests for maintenance of effort, then that district will lose a certain amount of funds to support students with disabilities, which of course in our state we definitely want to avoid. And so we will work with all of our districts in trying to get them to meet their MOE and in at least one of those tests, and so that they don't have to, so they don't lose any funds to support our students. And that's the biggest, idea around this is we don't want a district to lose $1 in supporting our kids. But MOE is a big piece that's looked at within this IDA fiscal monitoring. I mean, it's a huge area outside of the fiscal monitoring, but that's a big piece that's looked at when we go into a district and look into all the pieces of fiscal monitoring. And then we also will have an exit conference once all of everything else has taken place and we're to a point that we feel comfortable with the district. We'll have an exit conference, and that exit conference will usually be with the DOS, the finance director, and typically the superintendent will be at that one. And we just go through everything in detail and kind of what to expect and what's coming up. Again, OSEP, mandates that fiscal monitoring from all districts has to be done on a rolling cycle. As far as the amount of districts that we have looked at thus far, before this cycle, we had monitored 23 districts. Of those, 20 are complete and 3 are yet to be completed. We have 12 in progress that we're closing out this year. So a total of 35 districts that have been monitored. This upcoming year, we'll probably select around 15 to 20, maybe 15 or so, but somewhere in that range, depending upon our amount of monitors. And again, all 171 districts in our state will be monitored by the time that we get through the entire cycle. And when we select our districts for this fall, we begin that with an entrance conference, and basically that's just an introductory meeting that we'll have with each of the districts. That includes the finance director, the DOS, the superintendent, and any other staff they want there, in which we tell them, what's coming up, what to expect, and again, just try to be give them as much information as possible beforehand on what to expect. Our fiscal monitoring team consists of myself, Deb Morrow. She has 42 years of experience with OSEP. She was a former OSEP employee on the programmatic side, and then on the fiscal side, she was pretty much up there at the top in monitoring. So we're lucky to have Deb as a part of our team. We also have Darnell McIntosh and Kay Bryant, who are 2 retired finance directors, and they bring us the experience and the piece of that Munis experience where they can go in and be familiar with each of the districts, finance directors and their fiscal staff, and they can dig into Munis. And get all of that information as needed. And then we also have Chris Palant, who has extensive disability experience, and also on the fiscal side on our team. So that is our monitoring team. And again, that was just a brief overview of our fiscal monitoring process, and also a brief description of maintenance of effort compliance that I gave, in which we give support to districts. So any questions, follow-up questions as far as any of this goes?
Question in regards to MOE and general funds. I only know enough of the words to make me dangerous. So you can be like, that's not related at all, and that's completely fine. So when you think about SEEK funding for districts, and when we're looking at general funds, and again, so when SEEK, if I understand this correctly, when a county has increased revenue, SEEK decreases is a kind of a basic format of the amount. Does MOE ever take into consideration those things out of general funds? And when we see a SEEK decrease over time, What does that look like with MOE?
So with MOE, and again, we could sit here and talk about MOE for a long time. But as far as MOE goes, starting off, you have a threshold each year that you have to meet. So, and that could, so if a district spends $5 million out of their general fund to support students with disabilities, and we look at that out of Munis, they report these expenditures through program codes in Munis, special education program codes. And a report is pulled here at KDE, and then we take all of that information and we populate it into 171 different extensive, they're called MOE calculators or spreadsheets, but it's basically an Excel spreadsheet with 20 some tabs at the bottom with tons and tons of information. And we will populate each of those spreadsheets for a district based on that, whatever the threshold is. And then each year they have to meet at least that threshold. Now, there's a lot of stuff around that. If they don't spend as much, then they can possibly have what's called exceptions to meet. And getting back to the SEEK piece of that you talked about, as far as what we see that consists of general fund is our state and local funds. So in Kentucky, we classify general fund as state and local funds. State funds is strictly whatever they receive in their SEEK Exceptional Child Add-on funding. All districts receive that. So what they receive in their SEEK Exceptional Child Add-on funding is their state. Anything that they spend in excess of that out of their general fund in Kentucky is considered local. Most districts, each year you'll see they'll spend all of their state, all of their SEEK Exceptional Child Add-on funding to support students with disabilities, and they'll also spend additional funds out of their general fund to support students with disabilities, which is classified as local. And then that's all added together, and if they get to that point, and it's a lot more complicated than this, but basically when they get to that point, if they spend that much or meet one of 4 tests, then they basically have met or passed MOE. So as far as the SEEK piece goes, there's the SEEK Exceptional Child Add-on funding that relates directly to the general fund that all districts receive each year, in which they use and are to spend to support students with disabilities.
I guess it's the additional piece that I was.
Let me add just a bit, because when you ask about the SEEK funding if the local funds go up, SEEK funds go down, that's true of the general SEEK fund. That isn't true of the SEEK Exceptional Child Add-on funds. They aren't impacted by that. They're based solely upon what that district's child count is, ages 5 through 20, and the disability of those children, what the guaranteed base amount is for a given year. And then whatever that calculates out, they get. Is it reduced if they add more local effort or not? What Jonathan's talking about in the general fund, where those SEEK funds land, are also local revenues coming in there. The Munis doesn't separate a local expenditure from a state expenditure. So how we do that is we know how much state dollars that LEA got out of the SEEK Exceptional Child Add-on formula. We consider that they spend state funds first, and then anything above that amount becomes the local, and the two combined together usually meet a couple of those maintenance separate tests. The state and local aggregate, which is the grand total that they spent that year from those program codes they referenced, or the state and local per capita divided by the child count that year. Then we look at anything they spent above SEEK as local funds only, and local funds only are the other 2 tests, local in aggregate and local per capita. But in answer to your original question is SEEK Exceptional Child Add-on funds don't fluctuate based upon the amount of local effort.
And that's the amount of money that is taken into consideration with MOE, not just the, I guess like the SEEK general fund money, or
SEEK
that's
general
added
fund
in
money,
too.
we don't consider that in our process.
Okay.
Because of the way Munis works, it all kind of goes in there together. Funds aren't earmarked under the SEEK formula. They might get exceptional child add-on funds, but they can spend it in their general fund, wherever general fund can spend on. So in able to meet what the IDA requirement is around maintenance of effort, and that is state and local funds and local funds only, we had to come up with a process that OSEP would approve to allow us to determine how much of that was local monies that was spent and how much of it was state. It's essentially giving that district this much state money specifically for special education,
Right.
then that's
You
going to
have
be
to.
spent first.
Okay.
And then anything above that becomes the local effort. And the local effort by itself can be used. But because of the way that works, you don't, as a local district, get to say, I'm spending my local money first, and then I'm going to go. It doesn't, they would let us do that route. Yeah.
Which makes it, I mean, I was just thinking about like, again, if budgets are decreasing, and I know, again, maintaining MOE in that. I was
Budgets
just
could
curious about that.
decrease. They would decrease in special education based upon impact of the
Numbers,
child.
right.
So if the child count goes down, one of the exceptions that you're allowed to reduce your effort is you got a reduction of child count. So how much of a reduction does that account for? So we have to do math on what that reduction would allow.
I've got one quick question. You keep saying SEEK, so is that SEEK? I'm interpreting what that means. State exceptional.
SEEK is the acronym for Kentucky Way of Funding Schools. It stands for Supporting Education Excellence. Kentucky, it came out of CARA,
Okay, so SEEK.
SEEK.
Because I'm like, you keep saying SEEK, special education
It's
child
been around
fund. That's
30 some
another
years.
SEEK.
Like the amount of money you get per kid and then special ed money on top.
I got you. That's another SEEK.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
every district gets general SEEK funding based on attendance or
Your
enrollment,
seat
or
attendance.
some type of formula.
Okay.
And on top of that, there are a couple of 4 add-ons. One of the add-ons is for special education. Now, if I'm a special education student, I'm first a general education student, and I generate regular SEEK funds. But the thought there is that that's not going to be spent providing special education. That's spent providing my general education. So the exceptional child add-on funds were generated specifically to meet those special education and related services needs, though they weren't tagged that they had to be spent for that purpose. The IDA's MOE requirement kind of forces districts to continue to spend and support out of their state and local funds these services to kids with disabilities. There's also Fund 2, that's grant funds. That's usually your federal IDA funds or your federal Elementary Secondary Education Act funds. It also, there's a few state grants that are in Fund 2. And some of those state grants may also be used to provide special education related services in unique circumstances. So we have to look at those monies that the district spent and add that to that pressure.
Thank you.
All the homeless monies are very much.
Are there any additional questions virtually? Well, thank you, Jonathan and Chris, for helping him out, answer any of our questions, and we welcome you back to present to SAPEC should you find the need, any update.
Jonathan, I just want to tell you, thank you for presenting today. And his presentation just barely scratches the surface for the amount of work that he does. And so just know that Jonathan, he visits so many school districts, and you can imagine when there's new staff that come in, new financial officers and so forth, he's willing to go to any district whenever they call. I know he's been busy going across the state. And so I just appreciate you spending a little time with us today. That nowhere in comparison even comes close to the amount of work that you do behind the scenes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely.
Appreciate everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, right before we break and recess for lunch, I just want to explain to you guys how we think this is going to work with the committee meetings, because we have not been in a hybrid capacity where we had to hold committee meetings. So when we come back at 1:00, each committee will have 20 minutes. And I ask, if you are not in that particular committee virtually, you can just mute your mic and cut your cameras off so that that committee member that is online, should the need be a person is here in person, that they will be able to communicate in that capacity. And then we will roll on each 20 minutes for the next subcommittee group. And we'll start with transition. And we all just kind of have to sit and listen to what they're talking about and it's good with any update. But we'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work, we'll take some feedback and try to make it better the next time should we be in a virtual or hybrid capacity. Are there any questions when we return? So first up will be the transition team. So I ask that you guys be ready to go at 1 o'clock. Can I get a motion? Oh, Zach looks like he has a question.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Can I get a motion to recess until 1?
Seconded.
Second Ward. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Recess until 1 p.m. Back in session at 1 p.m. for the second half of our SAPEC July 2023 meeting. So first up again, I want to give that discretion that we will be operating in this hybrid capacity due to being accommodated to those virtual members and in-person members. And we cannot have the group, the rooms. Breakout rooms. We cannot conduct them in the breakout sessions due to the interpretation services that we provide to those members with disabilities. So we have to have this in a holistic capacity, which is why we're doing it this way. We will have up first the transition committee. Those that are on this committee will just be discussing virtually and in person. If you are not in this committee, it's okay. You can cut your cameras off. Up next at 1:20 will be the parent involvement committee. And we'll go down the list with the other committees on 20-minute intervals. So it's going to be a little bit unorthodox, but we'll see how it works. You guys are more than welcome to keep your cameras on and we'll figure it out.
And just for logistics, I don't think Danny's expecting to take notes for everyone. There's usually, a note taker for each committee that sends in a report. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Question?
Noted that I arrived, what time I arrived,
Tiffany Clark.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Yes.
Thanks.
This is April Miller. I have returned to the meeting.
Thanks, April.
Thanks, April.
If we don't need the full 20 minutes, are we gonna just take it anyway to stick with the 20, or can we?
No, we can move on.
That's what I wanted to know.
We can move on. Transitions up first. And I did have a question. Tal and I talked about this on lunch because I serve on a transition committee. Do I now come out of the subcommittee role?
Since you're chair now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, you can add context if you need to for transition, but you're kind of responsible for all of them.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is to go into.
No, you can stay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, transition. We're up. We know it's us. Did anybody else join us that was not previously on that we need to make note of? Did Cora come back?
I do not see.
Yes, I did.
Sorry. Hey, Cora.
Hello.
Cal and I are here in person.
And Zach actually met with us last time,
Yeah, this wasn't the last in
February meeting. So I have February notes to kind of go from, and there should be in your Google Drive. I did just put it in under the committee folders. We did meet April 27th or 28th. I don't think we had any discussion. If we did, I apologize. I did not record it. Did any other subcommittees meet during that time?
I think so. Unless they met on day 1. Day 2, we did not.
Okay. Well, we had talked about in regards to transition, so this is totally open. We talked about creating a one-pager for IEP meetings that could be utilized and might be a joint project of the Employment First Transition Subcommittee as well as the SAPEC subcommittee, and of course working with KDE and other partners, and looking at something that would be ideal for parents that would help increase parent knowledge, parent involvement, and also all other stakeholders to help with making informed decisions about transition services for students with disabilities. And that's the one thing that we've talked about. We did there's a little bit of notes from some work with OVR. And Cora, there was some of your staff had given some feedback as far as a previous OVR brochure from October 22nd, I think, or October of 2022 as maybe something to build from.
Yeah, Holly joined us last time, Cora.
Yes.
And then
She would be a great resource as well as Jonathan would too.
Okay.
Jonathan White. I know you know him.
A couple of the follow-up things that we had from that meeting was, I think Zach was going to share maybe a contact, and I can't remember how far we got with that around the Kentucky Interagency Transition Council. Of course, Greta and other folks here are involved with, to maybe reach out and see if they have anything else going on. Obviously, the context that Dr. East brought up earlier with our transition conversation earlier in the meeting, I think if there's anything of that group that we could work with them upon, I think that's right where we're at. We're kind of open to what people's suggestions are moving forward as far as looking at, certainly transition can cover lots of different ages, but we had specified kind of looking at that adolescent youth folks when they turn 14, because we know that OVR should be reaching out, or school personnel should be getting OVR information into the hands of at IEP meetings, into the hands of parents and the youth. So that we kind of saw that as a place to start with this. And obviously the biggest piece is going back to what we talked about earlier, transition. We want to prepare less kids for the couch and more kids to either be in a career pathway of some sort or, post-secondary.
Yeah, and we've kind of been perusing this one pager because, they don't know what they don't know. And HDI had a different type of, we're just trying to, we know that they're going to get the state regs book. But what if they don't know? And for those of us who represent the parents, like, we operate in a different mindset because we have the knowledge. And, now I'm seeing my own child transition to college, and think about all the other parents that don't have a me to kind of go through that process and what that looks like. So we kind of want to, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we know that, like, KDE doesn't give a one pager, like other entities give a one pager and saying, this is what you should do. And this is the resource. This is what this means and how you can help your child, what that looks like.
And the struggle gets into, I think, that as we played with resources, you can come up with, I put it on hyperlinks, and you can start coming up with Employment First Kentucky, HDI, self-advocacy tips, Commonwealth Council on Developmental Disabilities, the Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism, Kentucky SPIN, the Kentucky Interagency Transition Council, National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, and you don't want to overwhelm families. So that may be something that eventually you get to, but it's like almost thinking about a one pager that starts with here's one or two links to get started, or here's some general information. What we really thought might be the best place to start with is at HDI, they have employment checklists that were actually created with the input of self-advocates, parents, and professionals, and they're for youth, starting at age 11 to 15, age 16 to 18 for youth. Families and caregivers has one from age 16 to 18, family and caregivers age 11 to 15. And then they actually have, I think, above 18, and then I think they even start at age 3 to 5. So, I mean, it covers more than just, one piece of transition, but in there it does cover things like supportive employment, some of those guardianship kind of questions that you may be looking at, or alternative forms of graduation. It also talks about thinking about healthcare, some of those other pieces that families have to think about, because all of a sudden at 18 or 21, you're no longer going to have a pediatrician, or maybe even your family care provider will say, nope, I only do pediatrics for kids. Now you're going to have to find a new one. And all those things that we don't always think about. And we know it's hard for the schools to be all things to all people. So
Are we allowed to ask questions too?
Yeah, we want the input. Yeah, we open discussion.
Okay, so I've been out of it for a little bit. However, what is the accountability of OVR with schools? So like years ago, I can remember we would invite OVR to transition meetings. It was very rare to have someone actually show up to talk through like what their services were. And I'm sure it's short stat, there's a million things that we also deal with. So I guess that's a question that I have specifically. It may not be as related, but like, what is their responsibility? What's the accountability look for their partnership with schools? Because I felt like we had the accountability system set up, but I don't know what theirs was. But with that, again, several years ago, I think our district started developing some of the things that you're talking about. Almost it's like what's locally accessible for our families, because yes, some of those things are offered within Lexington, but when you think about, again, some of our more rural areas, they're not going to seek out because they don't feel comfortable. They don't have the knowledge base. You're very knowledgeable about the things that your child needs. But I have a lot of families within our school that they don't feel comfortable physically coming to the school at all, much less diving deeper into special ed services and those kinds of things. So, I mean, I don't know if it's worth or, how much we get back from districts, but like through our co-ops and stuff, are there things that we can gauge from districts? Like what does that conversation look like in ARC meetings with your families? Do you have a one pager that's more local? And again, there's only so many things that you can give a parent, and they have to kind of do that. But I think that's a struggle for me, whether it's a family with special ed, a special ed student, or just in general, is like, how do you get them to take action on that? Your families, obviously, it's relationships that you have to build and that kind of stuff. But partnering, I don't know, I just feel like we have so many different things that there's no liaison almost, to like push things forward and some of that. I don't know. That's kind of where my head is with some of this conversation.
This conversation at Grit, because we were talking
I was
about
just
how
going to say that.
to leverage Surtax
Yep.
on this support. We kind of dabbled in that
Sure
just
did.
a bit.
Sure
And so
did.
it might be that if in November, the panel was wanting to do a session, the role of the state advisory
That's okay.
panel,
Yeah.
it could kind of be a launch or a kickoff for this resource to say, let's provide a presentation. This is the panel. This is what we do.
Yeah.
We have provided a one pager, and
Yeah.
of course, make sure that's all vetted with OCO directors and make
Yeah.
sure everybody's on the same page. But then it would be present that here's a one page resource that's available that could then be shared with CERTAC directors to then share with their region
Yeah.
and their area to make that happen and give a little bit of substance to it, which is kind of where who's coordinating.
Because when we were at Greg, we talked about like localizing it,
Yeah.
bringing somebody in. I put out there, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna say me, like even us volunteering at a school. Somebody else talked about bringing in the principals, the superintendents, the teachers, so they can talk to us, so we can find out what the needs, which is why we're here today. we are not doing those that were set up regionally.
And of course, that's a little more in depth. So, I mean, you may start with that presentation
Yeah.
and just create a resource.
Mhm.
And then as you get interest, it may lend to that a little bit more. It's
Or even
like,
just seeing from districts, like getting some form or something that says like, you know, what do you currently have? What do you currently use? So that we can, again, you're not recreating the wheel. Like there may be districts that have created and used these things, or even co-ops that have started some of that work to see like where the need is, like where the gaps occur.
and I think didn't somebody even bring up possibly a survey through
Survey,
Surtax?
yep.
So you get the.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, just to see like what districts, what that looks like. But I think even, again, as a previous special ed teacher, like I don't remember knowing like what is the responsibility of OVET, because that was really the only resource I can really remember that was within reach in Nelson County. There may be more at this point or whatever, but you know.
Because
that was the
Cora
only
as a
thing.
panel kind of walk the fine line of, you know, providing advice to KDE and then what your role really is as far as outreach doing stuff, you know, so there's always that fine line. So you don't want to dabble too far into beyond what your role is.
And just as an administrator, there's lots of people who are throwing things and like want you to come and learn, and there's only so much space in your head some days, you know. So again, thinking about.
I think Ms. Cora may be able to.
Well, I was going to say, we can become involved in a case anywhere from 14 on, and certainly we should be involved, you know, by the, you know, end of their junior year, the beginning of their senior year. But this is an area that we have identified to improve in, because even with pre-employment transition services that we fund, we are not seeing our applications of transition students to services increase. Students are participating in them, but they're not then being referred to OVR for transition services. And the grant that, I don't know if Jason Wheatley's still there, the grant that Greta mentioned this morning, the $10 million grant, that was one of the things that I asked to make sure Jason put in it, and he did, was, you know, the rate, the percentage that we would increase that number of individuals that are referred. And we do have to be invited. And yes, you're right, the counselors have very large caseloads, but you know, I never want to hear that they don't come to meetings that they're invited to. And sometimes, you know, that has to do with scheduling as well, to make sure that they know ahead of. But that is written into the grant, and we're hoping to improve those numbers. But certainly, I agree with you, Tal, that I think the simpler that sheet is, the better, because families are overwhelmed with life and they just need to know the basics of what they can do and where they can go to access that. But I would be glad to brainstorm on how we can improve those communications, so that, you know, one of the reasons we changed how we were doing pre-ETS was that pre-ETS overtook transition. You know, pre-ETS was something easy that could be done and delivered, but it's pre-ETS is meant to be short term, and it should never be long term, and it's exposure to working and careers. But transition should be the main service that they are referred to us for application, and a continuance of services. So, and if I would be glad to have, you know, Jonathan come and speak about it in the process sometime, if you would like that to help clarify the role in the process.
Transition is one of the things, as far as homeless education, it's my top priority, but one of the things that I want to make sure people know is that FAFSA is undergoing a multi-year change. And it's going to look very different, and formulas could look very different, especially for families that have multiple children, and we're not really sure how that's going to shake out. I'm not an expert, but there are lots of webinars on that I encourage people to look at. Homeless children in particularly will be eventually within the next 2 years only asked to answer one question, and that data should be rolling over so that they don't have to keep resubmitting questions. One thing that I haven't pointed out to where homeless money can be used with special ed students is that homeless money can be used to expedite referrals in certain cases for homeless students. So if you need that towards the transition years, always advocate that, whether it's Title I or homeless grant or ARP money, that can be used for that. The other thing would be we have received not a no, but it seems to be a no from the federal end that money cannot be used really after graduation day for transitions, although it can be used down toward preschool. So I have reached out to people over me to see what we can do to look at for our homeless students in a transition space that way. It seems like I've been reached out by my counterpart in Virginia. They're doing things and figuring out how to sort of bridge that gap of transition from high school into whatever their post-secondary life looks like. And I'm very interested in that because it was a rough transition for me being first generation college, but I don't think college is the right answer for everyone. And so I hope to be able to update you with something later.
Before I do have a number, but for the Office of Adult Education, in April, I do not know what we ended our fiscal year, but we ended up serving, I want to say almost 300 students within that homeless population. And that is an area of underrepresented populations that we can do better. We can do better.
We typically graduate about 1,300 to 1,500 students a year in Kentucky. And it seems like 150 to these aren't finite numbers, 150 to 250 don't graduate out of those numbers. And about 200 of them have special needs. Mm-hmm. So it's a definite population. And those are just estimates.
Yeah. Well, thank time. Thank you, transition team. Sure we have some notes. We'll continue to report back on the work that we're doing. Next up, parent involvement until 4/21. Why do I keep saying 4? 1/42. Do we have anybody on with parent involvement?
I'm on parent involvement, and I'm sorry I've not been to the last 2 meetings due to moving my parents and closing down their house and life kind of running me over. So I don't know if I'm the only one, and if I am the only one, I'm not going to have a whole lot to say because I missed the last meeting.
We just excited to see your face, Tracy.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Is Lashina on your group? We were trying to, maybe Tracy, do you remember?
I don't know. It feels like a year ago since we met.
Well, Tracy, Tammy, Emily, and Michelle.
Yep. So. Oh, you're on this?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Lashina's on there with you, Tracy.
11/23/2001. Because I had to look and see where I was.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So we did not meet last time. Typically, about parent involvement, but I will start a conversation as a parent. So I know this is sliding back into transition, unfortunately, as a parent and also as a working with the Department of Justice. You know, I have 2 kids that have different needs, and one's on the autism spectrum, and the other one, she's dyslexic. And I listen, I think about, you know, I think that's my reason for wanting to continue on with this committee and kind of build, because so much information that even I hear, that when I'm here and I get a little overwhelmed by it because I'm kind of piecing together for my two little middle schoolers. And so I would say maybe I don't know what happened in the past because I did not know and I did not attend those original meetings. But some type of I guess that's why, true, I'm now seeing the purpose and the reason why we need to be more community with our meeting, because we can't even involve parents necessarily unless they're right here in this particular district here in Franklin County, to even come to attend and share comments or concerns or, or just hear some information as well. I do want to piggyback on the contact information that you're discussing. As a parent who, just like for example, I have a son who's 13, he's on autism spectrum, and I've been trying to get him on the Michelle P. waiver list for a year and a half. And I get lost every single time. And I'm like, if this is happening to me, and then when I did talk to people in the district who have the information, I was told for the most part, there's a glitch in the system there with that, because there are individuals who are aged out, but really there's no age out for the waiver. So the families have to let go of the waiver. And some of them are not letting go of the waiver, even though their kids are working, independent now, and all that. They're not. So some of the waiver holdup is because they still have them. So there to me, like, that is that's a problem, because there's so many other parents. Like, for example, even if it's not a financial need for some people, there's resources tied to having that waiver that helps families just understand how to prepare that student when they are 18, 21 and above. Like me, we don't really know what to do at that, and we're looking for the school district to kind of be our end all. And again, that's where I'm looking for the support, and they gave me.
I'll pick back at that, Lashina, and you had reached out to me, and it's just been a very difficult lifetime for me. So I can help you with that. I will say that school district personnel are not the experts on that. And there's actually a lot of misinformation because they are not the experts on that. And I know this because I work directly with families all over Central and Eastern Kentucky. So I hear all of them coming in, that not just from schools, but from everywhere, with misinformation. But as far as parent involvement on this committee, it has been my opinion all along that we put way too much onus on the parents to figure out when we're meeting and how to get here and what to do and what the heck this committee is even about. I'm telling you, if you poll parents, they don't even know this committee exists. Parents are not getting on the KDE website. They're not searching KDE on Facebook. They're trying to get through their day. They're trying to figure out Medicaid. They're trying to get their kid to school. They're trying to figure out how they're going to pay for the therapies that their kid needs, blah, blah, blah. So I really think this committee, this parent involvement committee, I think that is the disconnect. And somehow we have got to, as a council as a whole, make districts more aware, somehow filter it down so that information is getting to parents directly from their school, because they don't even know this council exists, much less when they're supposed to show up, how they get there, how they're supposed to get internet to show up, how they're supposed to leave work, drive, get their kids to school at the same time we have set aside for for parents to come express their concerns. So that's my 2 cents on the disconnect between this council and that. And we can't just shrug our shoulders and say, nobody showed up again. Nobody knows about it.
Have a parent liaison? No. And like, as a director, I'm sure I'm supposed to know that this council existed. I did not. I was a director of special education and I had no idea. I didn't really know until I got nominated for the position. Well, I think you make a good point, but it contradicts what we tried to do and go to the people. Like, we try to go to the people.
But people don't know who we are or why they should come to a meeting in their town. They don't know what we do. They don't know about this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. But when we tried to go to them, we still ended back here in Frankfurt. And that was the point of being able to go out, venture out in the respective districts, the 9 districts. 10?
Is there money to advertise? Because McKinney-Vento allows advertising, and I could see combination of that out of states. I'd have to sell it to my addiction.
I mean, but you know, we know it's a disconnect. And
it seems like an advertising problem.
I think we need to get in on the district level to let just like you just mentioned, like school personnel don't know. Administrators, what do we do? What's it about? Why should you let your parents know? Why is it important? How does it relate back to IEP, IDEA law? You know, there are times I have a mother with a disability, a daughter with a disability, and a husband with a disability. You might be 2 doors down from my house and I can't get to you. So I don't think the physical location is the issue. I think the issue is nobody knows what this council, first, that we exist, what we do, and why it's important to hear their input and what it could change. And I think that's going to take education at the district levels.
That was a question that I don't know, like co-ops, are those conversations that occur consistently at the co-ops?
I was going to encourage you to leverage the state opportunities. And so at each CERTAC, they do meet regionally with their directors of special education, who then take information back to their school district and share with their staff. And so really you got to think about it from like a workflow perspective, kind of let the information flow from state level to CERTACs, to regions, to school.
Yeah.
But then you have to figure out, how do you get that back up to where you know the needs of the classroom level and parents and communities. How is that shared then back up? The way we've done that in the past sometimes is inviting CERTAC to provide a presentation.
You're talking about CERTAC, and I don't even know what CERTAC is.
It's the new term for co-op. It's just
Okay.
a
So if
special.
I don't know what it is, you know, parents, I as a parent didn't even know there was a co-op. I didn't even know until my daughter was in middle school.
Yeah, that wouldn't be something you would necessarily need, but like, again, that would be your liaison down. Like, we could never go to every school director. That's not gonna happen, right? But so you gotta think about, like, where are these levels? Where do you start with that communication? Because even as an administrator, like, if this committee was to come to me, most administrators are gonna be like, I have no idea what any of this stuff is.
Yeah.
You know,
If
I just have a
someone-
little bit of a background.
Right. Like an article for my newsletter that would be pertinent for this issue. I'm happy to include it in the August newsletter.
Okay.
Yeah, great communication.
It's for.
Oh, yeah.
And let me also just interject here, if it's okay. You know, we have the special education conference.
Yep.
We really need to think about, as a panel, actually having a
session.
Yeah, we talked.
a general session.
Yeah, that's what we talked about, because we realized last year and this year we weren't on the agenda. And that's when we talked about doing a presentation. So has that information been released yet, so we can plan to be, I guess, a presenter? Because we typically would still have our meetings, but if we can go and let them select to attend, like, we have to select which group.
It's a good start.
I do think it's
Well,
good.
why couldn't we go into each session? If we're there, why couldn't we ask each session to give us 5 minutes at the front?
Oh,
Just
it's
to-
too big.
Just, yeah,
introduce ourselves to see who we are.
teachers that are leading through
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah,
We get
we
to
want to have our own session so they can come to us. It's like a breakout.
I just don't know that people will come to that.
The state advisory panel for exceptional.
I think if you advertise it or like you sell it in the realm of like, again, making sure it says like state advisory council, people are gonna be like, wait a second, there's a state council that is alluding, like looking for this information. Again, not that you get always the positives, but you are gonna get people that are like, no, I'm really frustrated with this. If that's a state council, I wanna go and see what they are or what they can do. Now that, again, you want all of the negative, but I do think people are gonna be interested in knowing, like, if I have an issue or I wanna make change, maybe this is the place I go versus my director of special education or my special ed
And it's all
teacher.
the way you word.
Absolutely.
If you can word it in such a way that when people read, they go,
That, Jared?
Yeah, the actual proposal deadline for CPC is in 2 days.
Proposal.
And Carrie gives us a little
There's
flexibility.
flexibility, but the actual proposal, I looked it up to see, that it's July 15th.
Carrie Bearden will allow us to put the session.
I think it should be a general session.
Yeah.
We have
Oh, like during the general session, have somebody give a little.
just have, I'd like to have everybody that's there in the,
Have a captive audience.
there's no excuses anymore. The teachers
And
know,
invite people to the session.
the directors know, it'll be very informative and there's gonna be
That's formal. If it's a general session, that's formal.
Here's my question. Again, I typically don't go to general session. I haven't ever in that conference. That's just me.
Yeah.
Are there mass amounts of people that go to general session? Like for me, I'm like, oh, I want to know this. So I only went to the things that I signed up for. Does that make
Well,
sense?
I went because they do the awards, but they're long. Last time they didn't have enough seats.
Right. Like it's not,
Special education
they shouldn't do
teacher.
that in addition
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, so
But I was just thinking like,
Well, I'm
What are the
thinking,
numbers for the general session?
we're the general session, but there's not another breakout.
I
We're the session.
but I just don't know.
It can't be.
Yeah.
I don't think. I
So
don't
what
think we have
CDC
capacity.
normally does is they try to find a outside
Speaker.
big speaker
Yeah.
to kind of incorporate. But before the speaker goes on, there is like probably 45 minutes of awards and
Yeah.
Carrie talking about CDC. Everybody excited. Greta does a little bit. The commissioner's usually invited to speak.
Yeah.
Governor came and spoke one time too. So, I mean, there is a great opportunity. I'm sure Greta would be willing to introduce the chair of the state advisory panel because she asked everybody to stay. If you were a state advisory panel member, she asked everybody to stay. So we did that. So she's trying to encourage that the panel members are seen and noticed and they're part of the conference. And then what could happen is create a breakout session that goes into the role of state advisory panel and includes some of the emphasis of areas that you all to have. And
Can we
Greta,
have
go ahead,
sorry.
Tracy.
have an exhibitor table? And we
Yeah.
all take tips manning it. So if
Yep.
we were introduced during General Assembly, 5 minutes, hey, and then, I don't know, we don't have a budget, but if we somehow came up with something to give away at the table, or I don't even know what that would be, or if we're allowed to, but have it introduced at General Assembly or General Session, have a table, and then have a breakout session. Then you
So-
kind of, all three.
I think that's a great idea. Danny, I'm in
Working on it.
this weekend. Can you and I, or the 15th, that's Saturday. Can you and I get together tomorrow or Saturday so we can try? Is it arduous, Jared?
It's really not, and actually, Melody has been coordinating for our office, for our sector. So, I mean, it's a simple process.
Okay.
I mean, when I put mine in the other day, it took me maybe 3 minutes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So you think can I do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we get a motion from the Parent Involvement Committee to participate in the fall conference?
I make a motion that the entire council, everyone present, participate in promoting the SAPEC through general session, exhibitor table, and breakout session. That's very specific.
Yeah, but I think you're gonna not get everybody to be there because we don't meet quorum on that one. So
Everyone that's in attendance. I mean, well, you can have a table if you don't have everyone stepping up to be there. You might as well not have a table. I'm kind of direct. Have you noticed?
I think, but I don't think we're gonna make it. I want to at least meet the goal and then exceed the goal if more people show up. Because I think if we have a motion on the floor, that everybody is there and we know everybody won't be there.
Everyone that is present will help man the table.
No.
Everyone's invited.
Was invited. How about invited?
Can we send around a commitment sheet for people to take a shift?
Yeah,
I just table there.
I just need a motion for that will be participatory.
Okay. I don't think it's specific enough, but I'll motion that we participate through general session, a breakout session, and an exhibitors table at the conference.
Motion on the floor that the SAPEC committee be participatory in the general session, tabling session, and breakout session for the CEC conference fall 2020. Can I get a second? Second by Carruthers. Open discussion. Are you guys ready for the question?
Where is it gonna be?
At the golf house?
Yeah.
I'll be
there.
Yep, golf house. You have the dates yet?
Yeah, it's the week before Thanksgiving, the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Do we have those dates?
Yes.
Okay.
It's November 19th, 20th, and 21st.
You all want to pay for me or side with them?
Yeah, the golf house,
November 19th?
19th through the 21st. Is that right, Jared? Did I have that?
I think so. Hang on, Joe. When you started saying it, I stopped looking.
Literally the week of Thanksgiving.
It's
It
usually
is.
the- it's usually right there.
Typically, it's the Monday and Tuesday. Sunday's more like money come in and goes to session. There's not a lot that happens.
General session is on Monday morning.
We started on Saturday.
It's a rough week.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favor? I'm sorry, any more discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstention? Aye, East. Motion passes. SAPEC committee will be participatory and I will get that completed as soon as I get the email from Jared. Good job. Way to go.
I'm working on a proposal.
Yeah, girl.
Thank you.
Great job, parent involvement committee. Next is supervision and legislature.
And that is, I think maybe just me at this point. Tyler Reed was on the committee with me, and we met back in February. But at the April meeting, we did not meet. The last time we did meet in the February meeting, we worked on letters related to and discussed, legislation dealing with discipline for students with tobacco, and the thought that the kind of heightened discipline that was going to be allowed for schools, districts to, to discipline students with was going to possibly disproportionately affect students with disabilities. And that concern, I think we expressed that in the letter and shared it. And we commented on some other legislation, but since we did not have any specific discussions in April, I don't think I have any more report beyond that. But I was going to ask maybe if KDE is, I know you guys are working on implementing a lot of the laws that were passed and that, took effect in the last, 30 days. I'm not sure if there's any other legislation or regulations that that KDE wants the panel or this committee in particular to advise on or anything like that. But otherwise, I don't think there's anything for me to report.
You know,
Not that I'm aware of. I know Melody coordinates with Brian Perry, and Brian often discusses the legislation, I know, during the superintendent's webcast. And so I haven't heard Melody specific details on legislation that Brian Perry wants KDE to focus on. Any priorities on that right now?
No,
well, thank you, Supervision and Legislature Committee. Next, we'll go to FAPE. I'm at 145. Do I have any committee members that represent the FAPE committee?
I think I'm the only one, unless there's someone online. Again, April, I don't guess they met. I was only there for the first day. I was only there half day, potentially on the first day. However, we did meet in February. So prior to the meeting in February, I think there were some ideas from the panel on things that we could discuss, which included eligibility, diagnosis in regards to discrepancy model and RTI, disproportionality and equity, and then working with Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council to look at those issues. So then I look back at the notes. I really do not remember much of this, but based on our minutes, we did have a discussion around the discrepancy model versus the RTI model in regards to district policies, potentially providing guidance for districts on, or having co-ops provide guidance for districts on the pros and cons of each model, including information on using a blended model. From what I can remember, though, I don't know if we probably talked about it at this point, but I believe in the regs currently, you have to choose one or the other. I don't know that a blended model exists based on policy. Don't quote me on that, but let's see, the other parts were support response. Oh, so thinking about like response to intervention, both academic and behavioral, to make sure they have access to appropriate instruction. And I think the conversation was like, if it's written in a policy for the district to use discrepancy model or the RTI tiered instruction model, at what point can they flop to the opposite? I think that's what the conversation was, which again, I think that's all written in regs really. And then it was noted clarification for teachers, districts on eligibility options for those with diagnoses that may not have been previously accepted. The example was dyslexia. I think some of that work also takes place within the co-op. I do not remember talking about this, so I'm just going to state it. It says disproportionality and equity, explore resources that the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council could provide districts to address these issues. What is that? What's the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council?
So the DEIB, or Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, we have a rep that is in our office, Malika, and she also is with OTL, and so that is a initiative of our agency. So there's a team of folks that focus on DEIB.
And she's probably been in there about a year and a half.
Because
that was last June when they came to.
Because they came and presented to us.
Last summer, I want to say.
So this is the question. So do they work with the guy that was talking about disproportionality? Like, yeah, no, it was you. I was like the second person I could remember. So do you work with, that's what you're, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Got it.
That's where Jared brought up the issue of equity in that discussion and the connections.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Work with them.
But there's a major initiative and focus on that work in the United We Learn KDE initiative to really provide support and guidance for DEIB for all school districts.
That's all I really asked. Again, I don't know
Was
what.
Michelle in your group? Did Michelle? Some of those issues, I think, were brought up by Michelle.
I think
She's not in that group.
I may be
She's
wrong.
not present in this. She may have brought it up, but it was Esther, Jeffrey, Ashley Barlow, Christine, and myself in February.
So do you have anything that we need to move on right now? Or you guys just gonna continue to keep chomping at the bit?
Yeah, I don't know what next steps are in regards to this, because again, I think it goes back to that kind of the same thing we we're just talking about, like what is our role in this? It was, I think, is Michelle a representative, a parent representative?
I think she is. I
Yeah,
think she's
so-
parent representative. Mhm.
Station and like the concern that she had when we were talking through this.
Yeah.
Again, I think it might be beneficial for our committee to probably look at the regs and dive into discrepancy in RTI model. Just because I think some of that, like, I'm not saying that you can't veer around it, but if it's a reg, it doesn't really allow much flexibility in some of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, as far as district staff understanding the two, again, as a special ed teacher, it's not really you that makes that decision. It's your school psychologist and the team of people that talks about an evaluation, from my understanding. So I don't know what that looks like in regards to making sure that people understand. Like, I feel like the co-ops do that work, right? Like, they work with the directors, they work with others in regards to that in school sites. But I think it comes back to, again, like policies, procedures, regs around which model you choose to use. Like, it's, you choose, district determines what model they're using. Now, if you're not going to use that model, you have to determine which one prior to evaluation and why you're going to use that. And I don't know. I would think that would be if you knew an RTI model didn't exist for the area, or the model wasn't strong enough. I don't know. I don't know where that comes to play. If anybody has any background knowledge on discrepancy and RTI. Are there any of those things making sense?
Definitely Morgan was the champion behind that discrepancy model for sure. Especially to bring context.
And I think, which was that in February when we started talking, when we wrote that letter? And now it's, oh gosh, wait, am I looking at, I'm gonna be in the wrong year?
Go fast. Yeah.
Well, I just reported on the wrong everything.
We gonna still love you the same.
So, okay, so it should be in committee work. Okay, well, there's nothing in here. Am I in the wrong year? Like, what's happening here? Where are you guys finding it?
But you're a one-woman show. You did report out. I'm sure she still has those same valid concerns, because she talks about it often.
Where were we in February?
We were.
Was I even there?
Yeah.
What? That would have been
holiday.
That's right.
No, we were in April. We were at the holiday inn.
And that's where the DEIB presentation.
Uh-huh.
In the teeny tiny.
Yeah, in the teeny tiny room, because they had overbooked.
I am not really finding anything in the drive or anything relevant to this year.
Right.
Well, thank you for
There you go.
the overview.
I remember writing a letter.
That's why I brought up Michelle, because I know she had talked about that a lot at
Yeah.
various meetings.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure she may have put it in there.
Yeah.
When did we write the letter? Was that last year and not this year?
It was last year.
Great.
Yeah, time is flying. So we have, y'all, we can't do it right now, but I think David is gonna say he the only one here today.
Not with communications.
Look at that. Cause I was gonna say, do we need to merge these two?
We talked about this 800 times and our answer is yes.
I know, I thought we talked about that the last meeting too, is merging several of them.
I think I just started doing it last time, and just pretending like we were working together anyway, whether anybody thinks you're.
We've always worked.
I'm a little honey badger like that. I'm just gonna do whatever I'm doing, and I'll deal with the results.
Okay.
But
We'll merge, we'll make sure that that's merged in the folders and stuff. Okay,
are you ready for us?
I'm ready for you. You are at 155. You have to 215.
I will need significantly less time than that. We made a Facebook page last time we were all together, in Bowling Green, which I just learned apparently immediately got shut down and put in Facebook jail. We have no idea why, but it was Facebook jail for 30 days. We hadn't even posted anything on it. I think I may have named it something. That was it.
Yeah.
Like,
And
yeah,
then I did post the flyer I made.
that's right. So maybe it was the flyer that got us in trouble.
I don't know, but we immediately got, put in Facebook jail. But it's back. It's back.
Our goal maybe between now and then is to maybe,
We'll get some content put together.
yeah, we can maybe try not to go back to jail.
Try not to go back to Facebook jail. But what I would like to do, Joe, maybe here in the next, maybe by the middle of next week before you leave, is maybe send the link. Could be sent out to all the panel members and anyone else that would be interested in it. And then we can start posting content that's
Like about the CEC conference.
about the,
Yeah.
about maybe anything that the panel would want put out on social media, we can put it out. I don't know how closely the panel wants to, put their thumb on it as far as approving what's released or whatever, and however we want to do it is fine. But we definitely want to make sure that we're kind of posting information at least pretty regular. That way, and of course, we need everyone to share. We can get these out to the districts as well and invite them to share, especially with parents. And that way, they at least know that there are meetings. They figure out maybe what we are, and they can email us comments.
So how would you guys like for us to communicate that to you guys to share?
So if you are feeling really sharing, what I would suggest you do is get a hold of one of us, because we can make you an admin on that page and you don't even have to ask us. You could just do it yourself.
I don't have Facebook.
Okay, well then you're a different case. I can't do anything for you.
Or I would invite you just to email us. What
Yeah,
you
you
would like
can,
to.
if they think they should be on everything.
Yeah. So, and anyone sitting on the panel, if there's information that you think would be beneficial for us to post on the Facebook page, especially through our committees, so to speak.
Yeah.
If there's committee work that's going on that it might benefit, put it on Facebook or whatever, shoot one of us an email and we'll be happy to do that.
And just so you're aware, for our purposes, anything that's sent to us, we have to coordinate with our communications group too, to make sure everything's consistent and good. We're following their processes and their rules.
Okay. So before we post anything, we should get with.
I think you just automatically send it to your communications people to make sure we're not like something or something like that.
Yeah, if it's coordinated with our office, then we coordinate with our communications group to make sure everything's good.
Can we find out that if we join that or participate, whether or not I don't know. I come from working in Tennessee where their sunshine law is very broad. And so if you become an administrator or anything like that, does that open up our personal Facebook to any kind of open records or anything? I'd like to know that, whether or not I would participate. I'm just saying.
Valid question.
Because like all the
Well, now I'm
social
confused.
media. just-
Thank you.
You going back to Facebook?
It just clearly says that none of these views are representative of my employer and all that stuff.
Right.
Because
Because I
when you
do
worked
know
in
that-
Tennessee, they give you a big lecture.
Sorry, Zach. I know that our Office of Communications sent out a reminder about, you've probably seen that too, I don't know, about like, we can only have so many social media pages and so forth. And so there's a little guidance on that they put out to say, make sure if you're communicating through groups, it comes through such and such and such. So, I mean, we can revisit that email to make sure we're following the processes, talk with our comms folks to make sure we're following those rules. And so,
Well,
just be aware of that.
Yeah, because I think when we talk about the preparation that it's going to take over the next 3 months to get ready, we're gonna need to have that to put on this one pager when we talk about what we do, the slides. We're gonna have to get it to you guys to approve, but how do they reach us? That's what we're gonna need to
You
communicate
have
that.
the same email box.
No, we're gonna put it on flyers. I'll say that because we're gonna need it approved
Yeah,
through comms,
yeah,
and that's gonna take time
yes,
so that we can be prepared by November.
right.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as long as we have their blessing, we're safe.
Okay.
Have all that.
Okay.
Just want to make sure we follow their processes.
So with the comms folk, can, I guess, we get together and you guys get together with this, not the transition one pager, but the SAPEC one pager, so that we collectively come together as the representation for SAPEC. Can we get with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we could do that in a Google Doc pretty easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll get, because this ball is gonna roll pretty fast. It's August.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, sounds great. Anything else? Comms, stakeholder engagement?
And I think a lot of this is, I feel like we're leveraging on the Facebook page to try to bring more of that stakeholder engagement. And stakeholder engagement, I think probably any of our committees is involved in that a little bit. All of our committees. But I think first of all, getting the information out is the most important thing, and people, and social media really right now is the way to do that.
We hope we turn a corner really, really soon, and I think we will. I think this will be good for us. Thank you, guys. 202, next up, the ad hoc committee. Anybody representative online from the ad hoc committee? Hearing none, we have wrapped up the committee meetings and reporting.
Dr. East,
Yes, sir.
the ad hoc committee, if I'm not mistaken, was something Brian was going to put together at the last meeting. And I don't know if he talked to anybody after that or during, I think at the conclusion of the meeting, I don't know if he talked to anybody. No one said yes. So I don't know that we actually have a formal committee for that just yet. So it might be a conversation you have with Brian and see where his thoughts were to that.
Okay.
I just want to bring that up.
I will. I'll reach out and ask him about it. Thank you. Okay, we are up to final remarks and exit slip reminders. I want to make sure that everybody has access to the Google Drive, the SAPEC Google Drive. Because I know some of you guys said you didn't know where the information was. So is there anybody that we need to make sure is added to the Google Drive while we have Joe and Joe on the talk to people?
Yeah, I can give a little final statement too after, just tell me when you're ready.
Okay.
I've sent a request. So.
Yeah, if you, you can send a request and I'll just approve it and then give you permissions and rights. And so you want me to go ahead and talk about my transition now? Are you okay with that, Dr. Eve? So I just want to introduce Misty Green. And so Misty has been shadowing me today. We've actually been meeting the past at least 2 months and talking about my job duties. And I just wanted to tell everyone thanks for allowing me to facilitate the panel. This is my third group. I started with the State Advisory Panel, went to the State Advisory Council, changed names back to the panel. So about 7 years ago, Greta asked me to facilitate once I joined the Division of Learning Services is what it was then. So now we've evolved into an awesome Office of Special Education and Early Learning, but it was a division 7 years ago. She said, Joe, will you please facilitate the State Advisory Panel for Exceptional Children? Susan Farrow was the facilitator at the time. Susan's still with us. She's awesome. So I met with Susan. I did what Misty's doing with me and just kind of asked her a million questions about the panel, and she was gracious enough to get me going and then just threw me in to the Lions. And then so I've enjoyed the relationships along the way. It's been great. All three panels have been fabulous. This last year, I apologize, the pandemic, it's been a little bit rocky. It's been a little bit tough. And I think we spent a little more time trying to figure out where we're going to meet than actually what we're talking about on our focus. So I apologize for that. But for the most part, I feel like I've met the objectives that Greta has asked me to meet. I've tried my best. So thank you for that. And so August 31st will be, I think I have achieved my education mission of 27 years that I've signed up for. And then I'm going to seek out the next transition for what God has for me to do. So September 1st, I'm officially retired and I'm throwing the baton at Misty. She keeps trying to duck. Like, no, you didn't throw it right. But the baton is coming her way. So I hope you welcome Misty Green with open arms. And I know she's like scared to death from watching all this and like, how am I supposed to do this? But Misty's wonderful. So everything.
Well, Joe,
thanks for that opportunity.
yes, absolutely. It has been a pleasure. It's hard to believe that I've been in Kentucky almost 4 years. This is going into my second year on campus, but thank you for always questions, calls, and navigating this process for Brian and I. It's my first, and y'all know, because y'all were there, my first day, they was like, who want to be chair? Who want to be co-chair? And I was like, oh, I guess that's me. And I was kind of trying to navigate.
And look at you now.
I know, right? And now he gonna help me transition my baby to UK.
That's right.
So I get to spend a little bit more time with him, but thank you. We all appreciate the work that you put forward with the mission that we were all designed to do. Thank you. Thank you.
So nice.
I think you're just so calm. You have such a calm demeanor. Opening again, like people are coming in and have no idea. Again, like what's going on? What is this? And answering questions. But I think that also kind of speaks to even moving a panel of people who have such passionate goals for them, you know, for and different goals. Kind of just keep everybody level-headed and moving. Maybe not as fast as we want,
right? We
I
have
appreciate
36.
that. And I don't know if I think many of you start to see, but the actual power that this group has, if you put all of your intellectual knowledge and passion together and coordinate, the difference that you can make in the lives of children it just gives me chills from head to toe. So just, if you could just get on the same page with that, it's an amazing thing.
Well, Misty, we welcome you. And yes, she's been on a lot of our calls the last couple of times, but we appreciate you stepping into this role as well, and we'll be happy to help. We'll all learn together.
Much love.
What was not on here is the next meeting. And y'all, today, we're not going to play those back and forth games. That's where it gets contentious.
Yeah, October.
That's gonna go away when you retire.
What's that?
Those invites gonna disappear when you retire.
They gonna come from Misty.
Yeah, no, Misty will have permissions and rights to continue.
So our next meeting, because we know what the motion was, our next meeting is October 19th, 2020. And does that end our term? cycle.
We'll continue to talk about term membership with Melody, because June 30th. But, so the way those they usually terms expire June 30th.
June 30th. So we don't know who will extend, but as Melody talked about, if for any reason your schedules don't permit for you to serve in this capacity, please submit that resignation. Who did it go to? The governor's office?
So that's where Melody was saying, make sure and let us know about that, because Melody, me, Misty, and Melody have been trying to coordinate. Misty just handed me the date of terms and expiration. We tried to reach out to folks whose terms expire June 30th, 2023.
Okay.
To ask them if they would like to be reappointed. Some of those members have said yes, some have said no. That's where Melody said we have a vacancy list of about 14. So then, once these terms expire and once we know and we communicate with the governor's office, then that way. And that's another thing is once we have the new group on, it'll be a good discussion to have with the group about, upcoming meetings, get them familiar with the process. There's an orientation, that John Copenhaver does to help. And so just to kind of get those new folks up to speed and organized. So, and Misty will be in the process.
So that meeting will again be here in Sauer, and we will have the virtual component, and then that November meeting will be at the Galt House, and more details are to come at the next October meeting.
So to clarify, we're not meeting tomorrow.
No.
And the next meeting is the 19th and half day on the 20th is what I have on my calendar. But do we think it's going to be just the 19th?
Just the 19th because of the capacity now. When they did that
Thursday, October 19th.
Yeah.
So I can take off the
The 20th, yes.
And we did that, Tal, because of the virtual component of trying to get it all done in one day and bam.
Yeah. Did everyone hear that regarding the October meeting? Because we initially had the 2 days, but it will be one day, Thursday, October 19th.
And you possibly could, this is just my little last thing, you possibly could keep those committees kind of condensed and not as large and unwieldy. And that way, this rotation might work easy for that. You just spend a little time each committee.
And then to clarify, we don't have anything on hold right now for the November.
We do need them. We always have that meeting.
But right now we have nothing on the calendar for November.
Correct. There's no meeting that's scheduled in November. The October meeting was in lieu of.
Okay,
the
that's what I was
meeting.
thinking.
That way we could just attend the conference.
Because it's always been difficult because members want to attend and yet we meet all the time.
Yeah.
And so now you sounded like you wanted to have a little bit of a presence at the general session. Do you want to put in a request to have a session, a breakout session, and then also a exhibit where you can sit up and talk to folks?
And we'll be doing that.
Is your email at kysu.edu still?
What's my email?
It's ky.gov, right?
Yeah.
The Tanika
.east at ky.gov. At ky.gov. Thank you for that.
So I got all the scheduling things mapped out, right?
Yeah. We think.
Fly.
Here we go. And we'll be in touch, communication, probably electronically as Tracy alluded to, with maybe sign up sheets, who wants to speak for the breakout sessions, who wants to do the tabling. There'll be a lot of coordination, but we think we can do it. We can be the change that we want to see for our children, the children that we serve. But we have work to do. We realize that. And I want to thank our online participants for your time, your commitment to the work that we do. We can't do it without our collaborative efforts, but still, even in the virtual capacity, we appreciate you and value what you bring to this committee.
Exit slip I'll put in the chat, and I'll also email a link for everyone to provide some feedback on the exit slip. And I apologize, Greta had a meeting, her schedule's insane, so she was gonna try to come back after her meeting was over, but still a meeting, so.
And you guys get an hour and 15 minutes back of your time.
Nice.
Can I get a motion to adjourn at 2:15?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.